Good evening. I call to order the regular meeting of the City Council, City of Lakewood, Colorado, on April 22nd, 2019, 7 p.m., 7:10 p.m. in council chambers. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul?
Here.
Roybal?
Here.
Gutwein? Here. Skilling? Here. LeBure?
Here.
Abel?
Here.
Vincent?
Here.
Vita?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Franks?
Here.
Harrison? Here. You have a quorum.
Good evening. I want to welcome you all to council chambers. Thank you for coming out this evening, and also welcome those who may be tuning in at home. I'd ask that if you do have a cell phone, please put it on silent. And we are going to stand and do the pledge. We'll remain standing for a moment of silent prayer, but before we stand, we have some scouts, and I'd like to invite them down to introduce themselves and what school you go to, and when you're done, if you'll lead us in the pledge, that'd be fantastic. Cool, huh? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Leland Twin.
Where do you go to school?
I go to Denison Elementary.
All right.
Hi, I'm Lowry, and I go to Devlin.
All right.
I am David DeBurco, and I go to Creighton Middle School.
I'm Garen Marshall, and I go to Columbine High School.
I'm Xander Jones, and I go to Creighton Middle School.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. And we'll all rise, and if you want to get us going, that'd be great.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. So we're going to continue on our theme with our scouts. Looks like we have a presentation, so I'm going to call Kathy Borges down, the Director of Marketing Communications for Boy Scouts of America. If you want to join me down at the podium. And Mr. Truax, you're going to join us as well.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. And members of council, good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with you. I'm an executive board member for the Denver Area Council with the Boy Scouts, and here to do our report to the state to you. We're meeting with numerous members of numerous city councils around the Denver area to talk about the importance of scouting and the value of scouting. I am a product of the Denver Area Council. I earned my Eagle just south in Littleton. Spent many a summer actually just down the way here at the Lakewood Heritage Center working camps there. So very, very fond of the city of Lakewood. But you'll hear from a number of our scouts this evening, and hope you'll take what they have to say and what scouting means to them to heart as they're looking at it. Just to give you some stats, we serve in the council over 32,000 youth across the Denver metro area with 7,000 volunteers. Of those 32,000, 3,500 of them live right here in the city of Lakewood that you represent. We're very proud of that. We have scouts everywhere from kindergarten all the way up through 21, and you'll hear this evening from a young lady who has just joined Scouts BSA and one of the first troops to be created as we've fully integrated and brought girls into the Boy Scouting program. So with that, I will turn it over to Lowry Marshall with Troop 2119. She's a founding member of that troop and is a scout rank to tell you her story. But thank you again for the time. Thank you, Mayor.
Founding member. Nice work.
Yeah. Good evening. I am proud to be part of Scouts BSA. I have become a scout on February 1st, 2019, the first day girls were allowed to join Scouts BSA. On my adventures so far, I have learned how to incorporate the oath and law into my daily life, and also always prepared to sleep in a tent in the snow. And I have also learned how to make delicious chocolate cake in a Dutch oven. I am also proud to be one of nearly 950 girls who have recently joined Scouting in the Denver Area Council. Now that girls can join Scouts BSA and earn their rank of Eagle. Eagle Scouts Eagle Scout is the highest rank in scouting. One must demonstrate proficiency in leadership, service, and skills at multiple levels to become an Eagle Scout. I am personally looking forward to becoming one of the first girls in Denver Area Council to achieve the Eagle Scout rank. In 2018, 461 scouts in the Denver Area Council earned this rank. These scouts provided 77,250 service hours to our organizations in our community. Now I would like to welcome my brother Garen Marshall from Troop 342 in Lakewood to discuss our exploring program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. In 2018, the Denver Area Council had more than 500 youth from Lakewood participate in the Exploring program. Exploring is a unique career exploration program for young men and women ages 10 through 20. The Exploring program provides students with an opportunity to learn about a wide variety of career fields and network with professionals already working in those fields. Explorers get hands-on experience to determine whether a career field is the right field for them. They develop valuable networking contacts with working professionals while getting to know other youth with the same interests and aspirations. Exploring is the first step in identifying career possibilities while having fun in an exciting and informal environment. I have been in scouting for almost 10 years and enjoyed every minute of it. It has made me a better person and taught me how to properly lead scouts when I need to. This summer, I'm planning on getting Eagle and am dedicating 5 weeks of my summer to volunteering up at Camp Tahosa and down at Camp PV. I would now like to introduce Leland Twin, a Weeblo Scout in Pack 437, to share the importance of our Leadership Assistance Program.
Good evening. The Leadership Assistance Program, referred to as LEAP, is one of our programs that offers Scouts experience that will have a lifelong impact. Launched in 2012, LEAP is a program for all youth in the Denver metro area who are affected by economic and social hardships. These youths are provided with everything necessary to become a scout, including uniforms as well as camperships, so they can attend camp at no cost. Partnering with more than 43 schools, churches, and community organizations, LEAP serves youth in the city of Lakewood, including special needs and incarcerated units, along with Cub Scouts, Scout BSA, and Venturers. LEAP participants benefit from a structured after-school program that provides a family-oriented, safe space in engaging activities for 1 hour each week. Through scouting, I have learned to be a part of my community by giving back to my community and volunteering my time. Now, I'd like to introduce John Kabiza, Scout Executive and CEO of the Denver Area Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council, for letting some of our young folks speak to you tonight. Lori and Garen and Leland are great examples of the 3,500 youth we serve right here in Lakewood. We're also proud to call Lakewood home for the Denver Area Council. Opened our offices on West 6th Avenue in January of 2009. We have 65 employees there, and very proud citizens of Lakewood. Our office also houses the Colorado Adventure Point, which is an indoor facility with climbing walls, air rifle ranges, archery ranges, sustainability labs, arts and fabrication labs. And last year we served almost 15,000 young people came through that facility, 22,000 square foot facility. We've also hosted a lot of community events there. So what you've heard tonight from our young people, we've been impacting scouting for 109 years. If every young person were alive today, we'd be the 16th largest nation in the world with over 120 million Scout alumni. So again, thank you for allowing us to present to you our pride points on the Denver Area Council, but also what we're doing nationally in developing programs such as this Leadership Assistance Program, which would which reaches over 3,000 young people in the Denver area who would normally not be in scouting if we didn't provide that. So again, thank you for your support and for having us this evening. Thank you.
Well done. Well, I want to thank our scouts. I want to thank everybody for coming out. You're an incredible part of our community. You're an important part of our community, and you're incredible leaders doing great things. If you haven't been over to the facility on 6th Avenue, it's really cool. A lot of fun things going on, and I think it's probably not our father's scouts anymore, right? There's a lot of new things, coding and rock climbing and all kinds of fun things going on over there. So thank you for that. An incredible, again, opportunity for our youth to get involved and to get back and to learn. And I think that opportunity fund was really nice to hear. And I think it's great for our community to hear. If kids can't afford to do scouting, there's always a way, and folks there to help them. So thank you. Council, do you want to address?
I'd like to say that Boy Scouts gave me quite a start when I was a kid. It's builds character, no matter what I might have retained since then. It helped me for a long time. So, but I'd like to thank the Scouts in general for all they do for our youth, and congratulate Lori for blazing a trail. Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very appreciative, frankly, that you're in Ward 1. I have been to your facility, and it's very impressive. I appreciate the traits and the values that you are giving to young people of hard work, respect, love for community, and service to others. Thank you. And the students that you brought tonight are a beautiful example of what you're doing. Thank you.
Well said. Councilor Gutwein?
I love getting to see young people and children speaking at council. So thank you for encouraging them to do so, and thank you for coming today. And I also agree with Councilor Abel. To Lori, thank you for blazing the trail.
All right, well done. Well, you're welcome to stay and enjoy the rest of the evening. Should be short. No, but thank you. Thanks for coming out and enjoy. Madam Clerk, will you please read item 5?
Item 5, presentation, Lakewood Advisory Commission, proposal on municipal broadband.
All right. Mr. Lieber, Chair of the Lakewood Advisory Commission, good evening. Yeah, it's tough. Have your Easter colors on.
I do. My
Very
daughter
nice.
picked it out. So I got something with the kids going. We are here to talk, Mayor Paul, City Council, thank you for having us down here. We're here to talk about municipal broadband. You sent us a proposal or an assignment to discuss and to explore the different variations of how municipal broadband will look in Lakewood if we were to actually look into the idea. I first will read the assignment that you sent us in its entirety, so be patient. Should the city, you asked us 3 different questions. 1, should the city council conduct a Senate Bill 05152 exemption election allowing for the possible deployment of municipal broadband throughout the community? And if yes, what is the right timing and the timeline for this ballot action, and what expectations need to be set? 2 parts to that question were look at what other cities have done and how they've worded their ballot questions, and provide city council with information on any national trends related to municipal broadband. Second part of the question was a little bit more complex. If the decision is made to move forward and the exemption is approved, A, should the city provide service to all geographical areas of the city? B, should one of the focuses be on providing service to those who may not be in position to pay for it at market rates? And what might the criteria look for evaluating need? C, should the focus be on low cost or high speeds? D, what are some of the funding options that other cities have looked at or used? E, what are the risks to the city versus the benefits to the community. And F, provide City Council with a summary of other communities' feasibility studies and deployment budgets. The last question was, should the city hire a consultant to conduct a feasibility analysis? And if yes, should this be done before any exemption vote? We formed an ad hoc committee in the LAC, Lakewood Advisory Commission. When we were deliberating this, we broke this into two different parts. The first part being, should the city conduct a Senate Bill 05152 exemption election, and should we hire a feasibility analysis before that? We left the second question, the bulk of this, to a later study that we can come through. So we're really today only focusing on whether or not we should actually conduct a Senate Bill 05152 exemption election. So when we went through there and looked at it, the Colorado State Bill 05152, to give a little bit of a history, it was passed in 2005, and it prohibits the municipal or county money for the infrastructure to improve local broadband service without first going to the vote of the people. The stated intent behind the act was predictability, uniformity, and fairness in the cable television, telecommunications, and high-speed internet access industries, especially where affected by municipal actions. The actual revenue is state 27,101, and a little bit more. But when we looked at this in 2005, basically, we can go to the people and put a ballot measure on there and opt out of the bill, the prohibitive measures that do not allow us to even contemplate what we would do with municipal broadband. In the last 14 years, 102 municipalities have elected to opt out of State Bill 152, all of which has passed. All have passed on the first measure except for the exception of Longmont, which took two measures. The first one that they had, they reworded it, came back, and it passed the second time. Within our 64 counties in Colorado, a total of 40 have brought out the opt-out question to their voters, and all those measures have passed to restore the local autonomy. The ballot measures in 2018, we had 18 municipalities which passed measures to opt out of the State Bill 152. We included Blue Rivers on here simply out of alphabetical order. And I want to thank Nicole for compiling that Appendix B with every single ballot measure that's been put out there. It's not as easy as you think to put that out there. So Nicole deserves some credit on that. But what you see in all those ballot measures is standard language. And the standard language is without increasing taxes and restore local authority. Some of them are shorter than the example we're using. Some of them are longer. But overall, those are the standard measures standard language to say, without increasing taxes and to restore local autonomy, do we want to opt out of this bill in order to even have the flexibility of the future? So with that said, we went through and we said, well, what are our recommendations on this? We recommend the addition of a ballot measure for the next regular municipal election to exclude Lakewood from the prohibitive measures of State Bill 05152. We determined a feasibility analysis would not be necessary at this point. Some education will be necessary as far as the ballot measure and what it means to us. We are not talking about rolling out municipal broadband. We're not talking about building a network. What we're talking about is restoring local autonomy and to have flexibility, whether it be next year, whether it be 30 years, whether it be 50 years from now, to restore our local autonomy and have our own choices to be made. So with that said, I'd like to thank our ad hoc committee members, Casey Hensley, myself, Nicole Melandri, and Chris Rivard. I'd also like to thank for contributions from our Civic Awareness Committee on the Lakewood Advisory Commission and Ken Fellman, one of the industry experts, Esquire, from Kissinger and Fellman PC. And that concludes our recommendations and our proposal, and we're open for questions.
Mr. Chairman, nicely done. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Do you want to grab a seat? Is it easier to sit down? Me? Or you're welcome to stand, yeah. Okay. Sure.
Laying on the couch, actually. So,
Mayor Pro Tem Abel.
Did you look at the whether we could use a broadband system to ensure net neutrality?
We didn't look into any of that. That's part of the second question and the more complex discussion that we'll have in the future. But for now, what we thought is we could address the ballot issue and then move forward with the rest of it on another time.
Okay. There was no feasibility study addressed, but as part of the ballot issue at Blue River, they said without raising taxes. Can we say that without an actual cost analysis?
You can. I don't know the legality of it. What I do know is that almost every ballot measure says that. So I'm assuming so, but I don't know that for 100%.
If we tell folks we're not going to raise their taxes, we better not do it.
Well, when it regards to this ballot measure, then we're not raising taxes. If we end up having that discussion, there may be cost involved.
I don't know how deeply y'all looked at existing systems in Colorado, but it's my understanding, unless something's changed in the last 10 months, that every place that has moved to establish their own broadband network also has access, ownership kind of access to the utility grid in the area they serve.
Without delving into it, we did look a little bit into that before we decided to address this question, and that's not necessarily untrue. So
that's not necessarily true, or
most of them that have implemented. I don't want to branch off into something we didn't talk about. But a lot of them, the feasibility is a little bit more attractive if you have your own utility grid.
Right. I don't mean to infer that you can say you can answer any question in a universal. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Harrison?
Just to confirm my understanding of what we're going to attempt here, the suggestion is that we would just go to the ballot and ask the citizens of Lakewood if they want to approve this, and then that would give us the opportunity to look at, have a study, see if it's even feasible, whether it is one provider or multiple providers available in the city of Lakewood, so that we're not making a utility for the city of Lakewood. We're giving choice where people could do the city of Lakewood or something else, depending on what these future studies say. Correct?
The ballot measure is not to roll out municipal broadband. It's simply to opt out of the prohibitive measure of State Bill 05152.
And even further, we would, because we're all a little sensitive on ballot issues right now, this would be something that we would coordinate with an upcoming election, and it would be held at that time. It would not be a special issue ballot.
I don't know how the ballot measures or the special elections work. I would leave that up to you to decide.
Council would be most wise to put it on the ballot during a coordinated election. Councilor LeBeer, I believe this was one of your suggestions. Go ahead.
It was. So thank you for all the work all of you've done. I know this is a wicked, complicated issue, and there's a lot of different pieces to it. The 152 piece was originally proposed because I think that is sort of the lower hanging fruit and just kind of opens up the door to a little bit more, learning a little bit more about these issues, and to doing feasibility studies, and to see if there's any opportunities or areas where the city should be looking at helping fulfill some sort of need. Of course, thanks for the presentation too. I think it is hard to argue with 92 other cities and counties that have been taking back local control. Keep in mind, if we move forward with the 152 exemption, this does not mean that we will have municipal broadband in Lakewood. It just means that we're restoring local control to Lakewood. It does, however, mean we would, as I said, restore the local control that was denied in 2005. I think repealing the preemption measure also opens the door to potential outside investment, the ability to assist underserved communities, the ability to work with current internet service providers like Xfinity and CenturyLink to help increase the value our residents are currently receiving. So I would be in support of moving it forward to a vote at the next election. Thanks.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. Nice presentation. I love the idea of us bringing back local control. That to me is very appealing. To put this on the ballot, do we know what the cost would be?
Again, I don't know how the ballots work or the cost on that. That would be something I would rely on you to have.
Okay. I noticed in the readings that I had, there were 5 municipalities: Boulder, Winter Park, Red Cliff, and Fraser. 4, I miscounted. That their ballot question said without preface or without raising taxes. Now, things aren't free. Do the municipalities that go forward with this eventually, do they actually have fees? Do we know that?
Well, again, we didn't do that research, but there would be cost, I believe,
Right.
if we were to move forward and actually explore the option to roll out a particular network within Lakewood. But as far as without raising taxes, you can say, because we're simply talking about whether or not we want to restore local autonomy. And so we don't need to raise taxes for that.
And then I also noticed that Glenwood Springs and Fort Morgan, they had in their ballot proposal, it said sale or purchase in resale. Could you please explain what that meant? That left me cold.
That I can't explain. I don't know what that means. I didn't read all the ballot measures. I read a few of them, and particularly the ones in 2018. And I noticed the standard language that was used on that. But we can do some research and come back and provide council with some further amendments on that.
Oh, that would be helpful, because of all the cities, there were only 6 of them that did not say without raising taxes. And I just would like some clarification on that. I like the idea of local control. I like the idea that we're going to put this probably on the ballot. I'd like to know what the cost is. I'm a little concerned that we're going to go forward with something without some public outreach first, because I don't think that, well, I know that we've never addressed this in our ward meeting, and I don't know how many people out there even know that this is, about to be put on the ballot. I'd like to hear what other people have to think before we go forward with that. And I'd also like to know, because it was talking in there about looking at folks that possibly could not pay market rate. Do you have any idea if other cities had means testing for that and how that was done?
Again, that would have been part of the second question.
Okay.
More comprehensive as far as the nuts and bolts and what we would actually look at as far as the network here. And so what we wanted to do is at least get this question out of the way, and then have the committee go back and research a lot of those questions at a further time.
Okay, because I think we need to have an idea of actually what we're going to be going forward after we put something on the ballot. And the only last comment I'd like to say is that it sounds to me like some cities that have gone ahead and gone forward with this, basically you've got a city competing with private enterprise. I'm a little concerned about monopoly kind of issues, but that's for down the road. All righty, thank you.
And I would say I think a lot of communities actually have done this to get rid of the monopolies that exist, because it allows them to have the independence, and it doesn't prescribe that a community has to do a community-driven model. So it wouldn't have to be the city of Lakewood creating a new utility. Centennial has a model where they've teamed up with private industry to provide those high speeds. So there's a lot of different things, and so this is just setting the table. This isn't serving anything. It's not picking the menu or pouring the drinks. This is just setting the table so it's there in case you want to serve something, and then you have that opportunity in phase 2.
I understand that, but we just need to know what we're putting out there as well, because to me, it's very complicated, frankly.
Certainly, and the idea of municipal broadband is complicated, and we've talked about that, at length within our committee as far as what it might look like. We haven't gone into details, but it is a complicated issue because you don't even know where to start. But this is really just, even if we pass this and we say yes and voters say yes, it could mean nothing. We could do nothing for 30, 40 years. And so it doesn't necessarily mean we have to take action. It just means that we want to restore local autonomy.
Councilor Bida.
I'm just, as I went through the list of those that have already passed this, it looks to me like it's and the maps indicates that a rural kind of issue. I mean, seems like most of everything's been in the rural counties, rural cities. Am I misinterpreting that, or?
Well, we have that map. Let me see. So, I mean, really, obviously, outside of Denver being one of the few places, but Fort Collins, Boulder, Longmont have passed it. So it is along the Front Range to some degree. Denver hasn't necessarily addressed it that I've seen, but most of the other cities on the Front Range have.
Centennial.
Okay, that's all.
But I do know when we were looking at that, a lot of it was who has access, who doesn't have the ability of private enterprise coming in to lay the pipe and lay the wire and lay their optics to have it. So that does make sense for more rural options to look at that.
Councilor Gutwein?
Thank you, and thank you to all of the committee for the great work and research you did on this issue. I think this is really important for us to be beginning these conversations because internet access and high quality internet access is critically important to, all of us, and then also our schools and our businesses, and just competing in the global economy. So I think this is great. I do think this is going to have a big educational curve on this topic. And so my question is about, I just want to check my understanding of why we wouldn't do the feasibility and explore the options beforehand. And my understanding is that that's actually prohibited. Is that correct?
I don't think it's prohibited in the bill. I don't know 100% if it is. I can look into that, but I don't know if we can't have that conversation. But looking at the feasibility, I read part of the feasibility analysis for Boulder, and it talks more about what the feasibility of an actual network would be. Okay. We thought as a committee was that we could come down here and say, let's get moving with the ballot measure, and then we can start to put together a comprehensive packet on what the municipal would look like and answer the questions in number 2. But really what we're just focusing on is to restore the local autonomy.
Can I ask this again to Tim in a slightly different way of just, is it money, if we spend money doing a feasibility study, or?
I think it has more to do with authority, that with the exemption in place, you have a lot more flexibility as to what you can do. I don't think the issue has been decided. Mr. Goldstein and I were just talking about it because Ben's worked on this issue elsewhere. And Ken Fellman, who we talked about, the telecom attorney, has talked to us about that. And it's not completely resolved, but there are questions about whether that authority exists to do things in that sequence. So the safer route is to get the voter approved exemption and then decide where to go from there.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I guess along that lines, then we could do probably at least a study session and community information so that all of us can understand what the options are. Because I've heard some about public-private partnerships, which sounds, appealing, and that way, because we're going to get questions about it, so we can at least provide some good information.
And I do think it's true. Every time we've brought this up with somebody, when we've talked about it, everybody's gone straight to, what would this look like?
Right.
What would this look like? And that's, we look forward to having that talk. We look forward to doing the research. We look forward to doing that. But we just felt this would be we could get this moving and then go to that.
Great, thank you. Yes, I think for me, based on all of that, I think this makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate the recommendation to move it forward. I think we will need, if we do move it forward as soon as this November, we will need some kind of study session to go through the basics, and then what this does, what it doesn't do, what the potential options could look like, and then I'm not sure in terms of timing if we are going to be able to do that by November. So for me, I'm not sure this is, I think we're still relatively on the front end of this compared to other, non-rural cities, with the exception of Denver. So I think that, I think we need to continue moving forward with this. I am okay if it takes a little bit longer than this November for the body to think about.
And so there's still some lights on, and so I want to make sure we get through all the questions, but I would say potential route would be to ask Mr. Goldstein and staff to, and you've been through this, but to maybe look at this. What would a study session entail? When could that be? We do have a full plate. We'd have to weigh that. Probably can't figure that out tonight. We'd have to weigh that against the rest of our dashboard and priorities, and then that would probably be the natural step to get more information going forward. So, Councilor Vincent.
I think you asked what what I needed to know. When could we do this? And would it be too early to get it on the ballot in November? Because my issue is I would rather get it, I think you said to set the table first and then do the feasibility study, because I don't want you guys to spend a lot of time coming up with a lot of information just to have us say, no, we're not going to do it. It seems to make sense to say that the people do or don't want to do it, or look at it further and then have the information, rather than have all the information and then say, no, we're not going to do it.
Mr. Goldstein, you want to weigh in?
As far as the 152 election, it's pretty simplistic. The verbiage has been used by so many different cities that I don't think it'll take much time to craft it to fit Lakewood's needs. I think probably by August we would need, I don't know the exact deadlines, but I think by August we would need that settled. If you wanted to do feasibility assessment light, it would kind of depend on what all you wanted to know before you were willing to go forward with a 152 election. Some cities have hired consultants and ended up with 100-page reports. So if you want a lot of information of what it might look like and what infrastructure already exists within Lakewood and all those type of things, that's probably a bit of a stretch. Staff, if it became a priority to council, staff would do everything in our power to get that done. But those studies can be a year-long process. I don't know that you need that much information. If you're looking just for some basic information about what options are out there, we could talk about having Mr. Feldman come and perhaps talk about some of the things he's advised other clients and seen, or even have another municipality come talk about what their deployment looked like, for instance, Longmont or Fort Collins.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Skilling?
Well, I think I would echo these points about when we would, so we're thinking August, is that right, Ms. Greer, that it would be August we need to refer it?
I'd have to have a resolution referring it to the ballot by your August 26th meeting.
And if we didn't do that, then our next, we would wait for another year or 2 years. 2 years. So we would, wait, I'm looking at, so Ms. Greer, is it we'd wait 1 year.
2 years to put it on your regular municipal ballot, 1 year to put it on the November ballot, coordinated with the county.
Okay, and is that more expensive?
Special election.
Okay, so that would cost us a lot more money if we do it in 1 year. 2 years, it's just our normal election, so that's a static cost.
Correct.
So it would behoove us then, if we're going to do this, to do it sooner rather than later, because otherwise you just miss the boat by 2 years, unless you want to spend a bunch of money, which I don't think any of us want to do. Tired of having elections wait for 2 years. So, okay. I want to thank you guys for a great presentation. I thought it was fantastic. It was a lot of great information. There was some little chatter up here. I think that we would all agree that some kind of what Ben was saying, some kind of, or I'm sorry, Mr. Goldstein, some kind of 101 that light thing, something. And I think the voters would want to have that as well, even if it's something super, super light, but something that you guys could probably do that. We don't have to hire outside consultants, I wouldn't think. Maybe, but probably not. You guys could probably handle that.
We could start that.
Yeah. So
well, he can do that on Saturdays.
So let me get through our Christmas tree up here. Councilor Franks, you haven't had a chance yet, correct?
This question is actually going to be sort of towards our legislative committee. Has there been any talk about Colorado just repealing, just given the numbers of municipalities, has there been any talk about them wanting to already repeal and we would be kind of duplicating effort?
Yes. There was some discussion early on about doing a repeal, but then they sort of changed their tune and said, well, actually the election is a good thing to have because it gives municipalities a better sense of what the citizens want. So they've decided to just keep it in place. So there was discussion about it, but it wouldn't be duplicative because they've decided not to go that direction because they think there's an added value to the citizen vote.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Also, do we understand maybe where we have, when this was brought forward, and this is, I guess, a question more for Councilor Buer, do we have service gaps? Do we have significantly underserved folks? Do we have price points that are causing us to think we have underserved or we're pricing people out of the market? I guess I'm trying to understand because I've not heard one person in my community bring this forth, so I'm trying to understand it from how we're bringing it forth.
I know Councilman Abel will have an answer, but I will also add just that the Federal Communications Commission just said in their recent report that U.S. pricing was amongst the worst in the developed world, and that's a quote, ranked 21st in the world. Bottom of the charts, comparative price to value. So we're way overpaying for services that a lot of other people get for a fraction of the cost, and we get no additional benefits to speed or accessibility, et cetera. So I think this is just another tool in the tool chest to give the city more ability to help make sure that there are no service gaps.
Gotcha. So more of a price, and I had heard that obviously other countries pay next to nothing. The other thing that I would be wanting to understand is, by the very fact of just us talking about it, does it start to give us leverage with current contractual, or does just the fact that we're saying we may do this, does it give us any contractual capabilities to press prices down and make things more affordable just by the act of us talking about it?
I think Aurora did this election last year, and one of their biggest points that they brought up pretty frequently was that they thought this encouraged outside investment into the community. So.
And the last thing is, has any, and I guess this is more for maybe Mr. Goldstein, has this ever been a part of any of our surveys or any of our outreach to understand if our community is driving this? Just because I haven't had any of these conversations, and like before I want to spend money, even if it's a smaller amount with the election, I'd kind of like to understand, has there been any community input on this particular point?
None that I'm aware of.
And my last question is that we would, in a study session, want to understand if there's some emerging technologies, obviously with all the hotspots and all the wireless sharing and all of the technologies. I would hate to go down a narrow path and then find that by the time we got something ramped up, basically technology consumed us and we all had Apple IIs on our desktop. So just wanted to make sure that was all kind of lumped in there, and that's the extent of what I had.
Mayor Pro Tem Abel.
You've done a great job, and we've asked you a lot of hard questions that you don't have the base to answer, so forgive us for that.
You answered the easy question first.
And thank you. To Councilwoman Dana's suggestion, I think most of these questions should be answered in a study session. Last year at the Colorado Municipal League Conference, I spent 10 minutes on a bus with Ken Feldman and had breakfast with the guy in Longmont who runs the utility, and they answered more questions than I had. It doesn't take very long, and I think before we put it on a ballot, we need to pose these questions to folks who have those answers from their experience and their research. So thank you, though, for the diligence y'all have put into this. And I would suggest that we look at a study session. To the question about how the need for youngsters with few resources, I brought this up with the representative of one of our current providers who said best they can do is cut them a $10 a month deal, and that's a few meals for some families. So that need is there. I believe it's extended to every Title I school. Also, the mayor was referring to speed. This provides net neutrality, so that Google can't slow down, so that a theoretical internet service provider cannot slow the speed of some customers and increase the speed for others, depending on how much they're willing to participate monetarily. So there are a lot of reasons for it. I think the best reasons freeing ourselves from controlled by the state. We can have more local control, the better, whether we do anything beyond just exempt ourselves or not. So for that reason alone, I'm for the moving this along to study session.
Councilor Bita, then Councilor LeBeer will hopefully bring us home.
Yes, thank you for your study here. I appreciate you taking this and dividing it out into pieces, so not wasting a lot of time on a lot of the more complicated issues, taking the first things first and let us deal with that, which is, do we go to election or not? So I think that was a very wise, good move on your part. I would say this, I have to agree with Councilman Abel. Yeah, I'm concerned about us spending a lot of time going down this road. I'm not convinced that there's an issue here or a problem there. I'd like to have more information as to whether or not we really have a problem that needs a solution. We've got so many other things on our plate right now, and most of it's related to our growth issues and those kind of things that we have to deal with in related. So I really don't want to spend a lot of our time on something like this that I'm not sure we even have a problem. And, you know, putting this on the ballot, then that puts a burden on our citizens to try and figure out, well, what's this all about, what's going on in education, and trying to educate them. And again, they've got so many other issues that they're having to deal with, and we're going to have a very important election coming up this fall with our council and so forth. So I really think it would be wise to put this down the road, maybe a study session at best, and get some of these questions answered. Particularly, is there really a need? Do we really have a problem that needs to be addressed?
Councilor LeBeer?
For me, I would just add that I think it's making sure that we have the autonomy and the ability in the economic development realm. We have major employers around here like Lockheed Martin, the Fed Center, First Bank, a lot of companies that really depend on those type of services to be able to provide the different services that they provide. And so for me, this is just having our own ability to make sure we're, charting our own course. I mean, that we have the resources and the tools to be able to address issues as they may arise. I think Aurora, that's one of the examples that they use. They said, well, we have people who are coming in and want to invest in our community, and they're saying they'd like us to have this ability in case we want to do private public partnerships and that type of thing. We currently don't have that. We're prohibited from having that. And keep in mind, we had this power in 2005 and 4 and 2003 and 2002 and 2001 and 2000 and 99. And I could keep going back. We've had that power since the internet until 2005. So this is really, to me, just about restoring that power that we had before this preemption. And I think it just opens up the possibility for future doors, and also protects the city in a time and age where information and the internet and that new utility, that infrastructure is the wave of the future. I mean, the way our system works now is UPS is like two different companies that deliver packages saying that they want to each own their own road, and we don't get a part of that. And we can't use it unless we pay them a fee. I mean, this is a modern utility that we should at least I think we should at least have the autonomy to be able to make decisions on, depending on where the direction and the future go. So that's why I would support it. And I don't know if the next step is potentially a study session, but I would support that.
So we're going to need to most likely have a study session. And what I would like to do is ask Mr. Goldstein to take a look at our calendar, maybe see what would entail, what you would need to do to be prepared for that, and come back at following meeting and be able to give us some dates. Is that acceptable for council?
Can we look at something though before August? So we can't.
Well, with the goal of potentially looking, before the election, or make it election ready.
Yeah, we can look at the meeting schedule and kind of backdate it from how much time you would need to still leave you the potential option to get something on this coming November's ballot, if that was council's direction.
Can I just add, I think it could be a simple study. I don't think it has to be a full meeting. I think we could piggyback on something else.
I agree. Yeah, so, yes, sir.
Councilman Skilling, can you give us a timeline and the questions you would like to have answered as far as that feasibility light? We can see if it's something we can do, and if not, we'll push it back.
Well, I think that would probably be Mr. Goldstein. If whoever's going to organize what the study session is going to look like, I think it would go hand in hand with that. I would assume that these positions would all be similar. You guys would be here, right? I don't want to get out of my lane here. So whatever, I think it would just be whatever experts we need for that study session.
So I think the best thing for us to do is we'll let Mr. Goldstein and Ms. Greer figure out what that looks like based upon our needs. If that's okay. Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Thank you to our LAC members, and we look forward to hearing more as we move down the road. All right, next up is public comment. This is the point in the meeting where the public is invited to address the city council on items that did not appear on the agenda. All comments should be directed to the city council. I ask that all in attendance observe the decorum of the city council chambers and refrain from applause or audible support or discord with the speaker. I will read the names from the public comment roster and ask that you line up on both sides of the room in the aisles near the podium. We don't have a lot signed up, so I think we'll be okay. If you have not signed up to speak, please stop by. This is really important. Please stop by the clerk's desk and sign the roster. This will help with not only our record keeping, but your contact information in case you need a follow-up. In order to keep things moving, I'll ask that those of you who wish to agree with a certain speaker, rather than coming to the podium and repeating what was already said, perhaps you'll be kind enough to stand at the appropriate time and share your support. I'll be sure to take a count of those, and we'll acknowledge that. 3-minute time limit. The indicator lights on this little lectern will be green for 2.5, yellow for 30 seconds, red at 3, and I'll politely try to wrap you up. And so, Mr. Robinson, looks like you want to pull some time. So is everybody here? Do you have Christopher, Ken, and Karen? Okay, perfect. Come on down and we'll give you 10 minutes here. Oh, that's cool. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you for taking the time to let me speak for a couple minutes. My name is Michael Robinson. I live at 1327 Holland Street in Lakewood. I'm here to talk about the Century Communities project by the name of Pearson Grove. 14th and Independence borders my property. Very briefly, some things how it's affected me directly. They cut down trees that belonged to me. They didn't belong to them. They were on my property. Their silt fences, I called them repeatedly and told them, like, you need to put these silt fences up. You don't understand the water that happens in this field. This was all talked about in this room when that project got approved. That was one of the biggest issues with it, and it still got approved. And it still got approved for special district funding, much less. The silt fences, the last big snow we had, they still weren't in place, which I'll get to that in a minute. My yard flooded with mud, silt, dirt. Some of you guys have probably seen these pictures, but this is what came into my yard. And mine's not the only yard down that strip of houses.
Mike, if you put it.
I've taken pictures and videos of everything that's happened. I have about 100 pictures, several videos, email chains, text messages. It's all documented what's been going on. Up until that point, I hadn't called the city. I hadn't called anybody else. I tried to deal with Shane Prawl, who was a project manager of Century Communities. I found out Thursday of last week that he's no longer with them. He decided to leave the company. Don't know why, didn't ask. It's not my business, but I wish him the best of luck. As far as he's concerned, I feel he tried to do everything right and correct things that were done wrong. It's my opinion that Century Communities had his hands tied the entire time and would not let him do his job correctly. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my opinion on it. After this happened and an incident with a gentleman that worked for, actually owned one of their subcontractors, the dirt work company, I won't mention his name or what happened, I'm sure some of you already know. That's the point I'd had enough. I started calling people at the city. I called the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment Water Quality Division. As you know, this is the preliminary report that they filed from an inspection that the state came here and did, which for any of you that might not know, this might have implications with Lakewood's MS4 stormwater permit, which allows Lakewood to dump water into dump it into Colorado stormwater, right into the watersheds. I can't remember right now the actual watershed that it goes into, but those are the preliminary violations that the state inspector found. The final report is due this week. I'll be interested to see what that says and if it mentions Lakewood's MS4 stormwater permit, which I wouldn't be surprised if it does. I will say thank you to the city for making the developer come in and cut a diversion ditch and a sediment pond to protect our properties. Part of the application, Lakewood won't issue a stormwater permit if it's over 5 acres disturbed ground. It has to go to the state. That's why Century Communities went to the state. It's my understanding. Part of the application for that, there was a map that said that that ditch and that sediment pond should have been in place as soon as possible. That did not happen. I asked who was supposed to inspect that. CMS Environmental Services is supposed to inspect that. They did not do their job, which is listed on that paper. Phase Construction or Phase Consultants supposed to put the BMPs in place, silt fences, straw wattle, all these other things. They didn't do their job and didn't maintain them. So on and so forth. It continues. It's just a laundry list of issues with this developer. My yard's not fixed still to this point. There's no plan in place to fix my yard. It's cost me several $1,000s already in time off work to get estimates for arborists, landscapers, make sure my yard's not flooding every time it rains because of this. My wife and I have talked about it. I don't really know what option I have left at this point to spend more money and go hire an attorney to get my yard fixed, which I personally feel never should have come to this. Like I said, the state report's due out this week. Anybody would like to see it, I'll tell you how to get to it. I'm sure you guys will know already, but if not, feel free to contact me and I'll forward it to you. One of the big issues that's going on right now is, I guess I'm out of time.
No, you're all right.
I'll make it quick. Thank you.
No, you're pooled, but for some reason it stopped at 5, so we're good.
Well, I'll make it quick. I know you guys are going to be here for a long time tonight. They've been filling in dirt, hundreds of semi-loads of dirt, right? You can't compact frozen dirt. I mean, you can ask any engineer that, I'm pretty sure they're going to tell you the same thing. You cannot compact frozen soil. They've been spraying water on it when it's below freezing outside during the day, much less at night. That dirt freezes. There's 15, 20 feet of fill dirt by Independence that's got pad sites built on already. What's going to happen when that ground thaws out? You're going to build 84 townhouses on ground that wasn't compacted the correct way. They're going to fall apart. And then I get to look at a building that's falling apart that nobody wants to build, nobody wants to buy. You know, it's not just about me, it's about the whole neighborhood. There's a school right across the street. Where are people going to park? There's no curbs, there's no sidewalks anywhere in that area. This is all things we talked about. There's kids that walk up and down those streets in the morning and at night. They're going to get ran over. I'm telling you now, one of them's going to get ran over. You're building 140 some units on the north side of 14th and 84 townhouses on the south side of 14th in 2 blocks in a school zone. The storm pipe that's got to go down 14th is another big point. How do you dig 30-inch ID, 36-inch outside diameter pipe and put it underneath the duct bank that belongs to Century and Quest Communications that's already 6 feet deep, and you got to have an 18-inch clearance under it? You got to have a trench that's 11 feet deep. How do you put a trench box in a trench that's 11 feet deep and not cut off everybody's utilities down that road? And if you do cut them, who's going to fix them? Who's going to fix the clay sewer pipes? Because they're not going to fix them the right way. They haven't done anything right yet. If you cut them off, they say they fixed it, and it goes bad in 2 years. Who's going to pay the $30,000 to replace the sewer line? Because it's not going to be Century. I guarantee you that. I have to watch trenching and shoring videos at work every year and watch videos of people getting buried alive. It's not pretty. I don't know if you guys have ever had to watch something like that. But if I see them digging a trench and not putting a trench box in it, if it's deeper than 59 inches, I'm going to call OSHA and I'm going to call them on the spot. Might save somebody's life. Fire department. I talked to West Metro Fire Department about blocking access to my street, a dead-end street. The road's so narrow there and so the intersection, if they dig up, put that pipe through there, I don't feel you can get an ambulance through that intersection, much less a fire engine. If you do half and half even. What if somebody has a heart attack or a house catches on fire? West Metro said they do not allow you to block a dead-end street. So if that street gets blocked, call a fire marshal. There's a lot of other things that I could talk about, but I know you guys, thank you for giving me your time. As always, I'll be happy to talk to anybody. I'll come meet with you. I'll call you. You can send me an email. I'll meet you and look at it if you want. I would hope that the city council, I don't know what can be done, but they would look into this project and see there hasn't even been a yard of concrete poured yet, and these are the issues that have been going on. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson? And Ms. Poston, and then that exhausts the roster. If you want to speak under general public comment, please come see Margie.
Good evening. I want to thank you all very, very much for this study session regarding the assessment of the legal department. I'm sorry I wasn't here to be present. I did watch the entire presentation and just wanted to offer a couple of comments. First of all, in terms of my orientation, as a new college graduate, I had an opportunity to accept a fellowship with an organization called the Citizens Research Council of Michigan. They were focused on, like a sister organization associated with University of Colorado, focused on making the most efficient use of tax dollars, examining budgets. This was in Detroit, examining school district budgets, city budgets. How are we going to get the best service for the amount of money that we're paying as tax dollars? As an attorney, I was involved with a national client providing national representation. Cost containment was the theme. Later on, with another firm providing services on behalf of the aviation community, representing aircraft companies, manufacturers in air crash litigation. Again, the theme was cost containment. I later served as an in-house counsel for a Fortune 500 company managing their litigation. We saved over $2 million the first year in attorney's fees by bringing that work in-house. Why I'm sharing this with you is simply to say, based upon my experience as an attorney and also as somebody who has been oriented toward getting the best value for our tax dollar, there's no question, there's simply no question that you bring in the legal services for the city, you're going to save money. Now, you may decide you want to spend extra money for some reason, but the bottom line is you are going to save money by bringing those services in-house. And what's interesting about the hybrid, looking for the clock.
50 seconds.
Oh, 50 seconds, okay. What's interesting about this hybrid is, unlike most instances where the general counsel is in-house and is outsourcing everything else, in this case, we have the general counsel as being the outsource. In other words, you are paying an hourly rate for his services, and you're paying for profits for the firm, not simply for his salary. So at any rate, 2 points. One is you're going to save money. Number two, qualitatively, you're going to have an attorney who is a public servant. Not an attorney making profit for his firm, but somebody who is oriented toward providing services for the public. And that's a different orientation and a different discipline that's going to better serve the city.
Thank you. Your time's up.
Thank you.
Ms. Poston? Good evening.
Good evening.
I first came here because I saw on the agenda that they were going to do this broadband thing. And then I heard this presentation with this gentleman over here, and I just want to say, I don't even know what to say. When somebody says special districts to me now, I just get these chills down my spine. But I would like to say about this presentation that just happened with the broadband, that you all gave them an assignment, a homework assignment, and I kind of feel like they turned in a partial assignment. It really didn't address some of the needs that I think, and here's the thing that I truly want to say is, why? And is there anybody that you're setting this table for that is hungry? Because I have never heard of anybody wanting this. I've never heard of anybody in my experience with public saying to me, broadband, we need that. I just haven't gotten there yet. And I guess it's because we've got a Starbucks at every 4 miles away. And I don't know about you, but I've always been able to use Starbucks to do any kind of computer work at all. And they also let me use their bathroom for free. So I honestly think you all need to rethink whether government should be in this business at all. My 3 objections to this is, I don't think government can keep up with this technology. God knows I can't. And I don't think this is a function of government. And I'm kind of concerned that citizens might lose their privacy, because if you've been doing any kind of listening on the federal levels as to what's happening with some of the Google, some of the technology that's being put into your house, and now we have people listening on a pretty regular basis, and then beginning to think that this would maybe give the citizen access to my private information without a warrant. That's all I really need to say. Please reconsider this, because like I said, I just don't think that there's anybody out there saying, please do this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. And to the Pearson Grove folks, thank you for coming out. I'm sorry that you had to come out. We've been in contact, I think, with many of you. Many of the folks on the dais was not aware that there was a change at Century, so it looks like we'll have to do another check in there, and we'll do that ASAP. And our staff is here as well to hear those concerns, and we can try to continue to engage and look. I know our staff has been engaged, but continue to look at what's going on. So yeah, thank you all. All right, Mr. Goldstein, do you have a report?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Yep. Just a couple quick items for you. First off, I wanted to let you all know that the city recently received the Starburst Award. This is awarded by GOCO, or the lottery, and the city received that award for its work for Carmody Park, the renovation there. The award is only given out to 11 communities, or in 2019 was only given out to 11 communities, and was awarded based on the project's creativity, impact on economic and social, or social and economic impacts in the community, and the project's ability to achieve its goals. So great news for our community resources folks, and congratulations to them. I also wanted to give you a couple reminders as far as the council calendar. We have no city council meeting next Monday, so a reminder there. I'm sure you all are aware of that. I know. Also, we will have another special meeting at 5:30 on May 6th. So a reminder for you on that, given that we don't have a meeting next week. And then on May 13th, we have a packed agenda before the meeting even starts. So at 5:30, you'll have a special meeting to talk about Parkland. And then beginning at 6, although you won't be able to attend until the conclusion of your 5:30 meeting, we'll have the reception for sustainability awards. So just know that we're aware that there's some overlap there, and we think you'll still have some time to attend the reception before the council meeting starts. But that's just kind of how it worked.
Great.
And that's it.
Thank you very much. A lot of great awards coming through the city of Lakewood. It's fantastic. All right. Looks like next up is the consent agenda. Use of the consent agenda has been made to expedite council action. It contains both resolutions and first reading ordinances. Tonight will just be first reading ordinances. First reading ordinances appear on the agenda only for the purpose of setting future public hearing dates and ordering the newspaper publication of the proposed ordinance. No public comments will be heard this evening on first reading ordinances. The public will have an opportunity to comment on the proposed ordinances during the scheduled public hearings on the dates set tonight by council. Any council member requests an item on the consent agenda be removed for separate discussion and action under general business. Will the clerk please read the consent agenda into the record?
The consent agenda consists of items 8 through 11. Item 8, Ordinance 2019-20 to rezone land located at 730 Sims Street, Lakewood, Colorado 80401, County of Jefferson, State of Colorado. Item 9, Ordinance 2019-21, amending the Lakewood zoning ordinance. Item 10, Ordinance 2019-22, designating the structure located at 1401 Garrison Street, Lakewood, Colorado, County of Jefferson, State of Colorado as a local landmark. Item 11, accepting the minutes of the Lakewood Planning Commission of December 5th, 2018, January 16th, and February 20th, 2019. And I would also like to add Resolution 2019-19, which is at your places tonight, to the consent agenda. It extends the termination date for the City Council Advisory Ad Hoc Committee regarding the development dialogue.
All right. Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem?
Mayor Paul, I move for acceptance of the minutes of boards and commissions. Order all ordinances introduced on first reading to be published in the Denver Post with public hearings set for the date included in the ordinance, and for adoption of resolutions, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Please cast your votes. And that passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Will the clerk please read item 12?
Item 12, Ordinance 2019-17, authorizing a supplemental appropriation of $300,000 to the 2019 fiscal year to fund the July 2nd, 2019 special municipal election and further declaring an emergency.
All right, I'll now open the public hearing on ordinance 2019-17. There's nobody's indicated a wish to speak. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and ask for a motion.
Mayor Paul, I move for the adoption of ordinance O-2019-17 on second and final reading.
Second.
This motion is second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. Passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. I'll just make one comment. We very rarely use an emergency ordinance, and that takes a supermajority, which clearly this has, but this will go into effect as soon as it's signed rather than waiting the 30 days. So it'll be able to be utilized. Councilor LeBerry, your light's on.
I'll just make a quick comment. On the agenda, it says that council could wait and place the ballot question to the November ballot. I just want to make it clear that that's not the case, and that's just an error in the packet. Just want to make that announcement just in case anybody's reading this feeling like we're making this decision properly. Thanks.
Will the clerk please read item 13?
Item 13, Ordinance 2019-18 for the conveyance of a water line easement to the Bear Creek Water and Sanitation District across a portion of Hodgson Park.
Now open the public hearing on ordinance 2019-18. Nobody's indicated a wish to speak. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and ask for a motion.
I move for the adoption of ordinance O-2019-18 on second and final reading.
Second.
This motion is second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. 11 ayes, 0 nays. All right. The clerk, please read item 14.
Item 14, Ordinance O 2019-19, repealing and replacing portions of Chapter 9.52 and Chapter 12.04 of the Lakewood Municipal Code concerning noise.
Okay, I'll now open the public hearing on 2019-19. Before I have public comment, we do have a presentation from our Director of Planning, Mr. Jay Hutchison. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. I'm here to talk again about construction noise and changing the existing ordinance that relates to that topic. You may remember that you had a study session on this earlier this year, and our effort was to try to produce an ordinance that would implement what you suggested would be your preferences on that during that study session. There's one item that I'll talk about that you left open-ended, and we tried to reflect that as well. And I'll be clear about that at the end of the presentation so that it'll be on your plate right at that time. In addition to the City Council study session earlier this year, there's been input in a variety of ways over the course of time as noise has occurred. We've received that both from you as members of the City Council and also directly from the public. We've also sought some input looking at the service request system, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. That was a request from the council during the last meeting, as well as contacting some folks in the construction field, which we've done as well. That's reflected also in the packet. Of course, there will be a public comment time tonight, and this was also on Lakewood Speaks, and there were no comments or questions that came through Lakewood Speaks on this particular topic. Four parts to the presentation this evening, and I won't go into anywhere near the level of detail that I did in the earlier study session, but I do want to talk a little bit about some generally applicable limitations. I'll mention what exists today and then also what's in the proposed ordinance. There are also some activities that would be explicitly authorized by the proposed ordinance. I'll talk about those as the second topic. And then temporary exemptions. That actually is something that's in the ordinance today, but I'll reiterate that so that it'll be fresh on everyone's mind. And I'll conclude with a little bit of discussion about traffic and routing construction traffic specifically. And that'll be the last part of the presentation before your discussion and public comment. The current ordinance does have limitations on work days and work hours. I'm sorry, it does not have limitations on work days, so any day of the week is available for construction activities anywhere in the community. It does have limitations on work hours, and as you'll see up here, there are two different time frames, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. or 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. It doesn't make a lot of sense for those to be different, as we discussed during your study session, so what we've proposed is that they be combined, and as you'll see, to restrict them on both ends a bit. The proposed limitations, that is what's in the proposed ordinance that you've got before you tonight, would prohibit construction activities on Sundays. And I should mention here that the definition of construction activities is pretty broad, so while it's hammers and nails and wood, it's also demolition and installing equipment and taking things off the site and hauling construction debris, all of those kinds of things. So not on Sundays, also not on city recognized holidays, and I'll come back to that at the end. This is the item that you indicated you want to speak a little bit more about later and decide whether it was all city recognized holidays or some of the city recognized holidays. And then finally, the hours are made consistent. So construction would only be allowed between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. So not the earliest start time that's in the ordinance today, a little later, not the latest completion time that's in the ordinance today, completion a little bit earlier. There are some activities that would be explicitly authorized, and by that I mean those generally applicable restrictions that I just described on the preceding slide would not apply unless I mention them specifically here. The first of those is emergencies, and there's a couple of obvious examples for emergencies. Water lines break at night sometimes in the middle of winter. That activity to repair those water lines could begin immediately regardless of the time of day or day of the week. Another example that's not thought of quite as often is when a building is damaged by an errant vehicle, as an example. There's often immediate needs to stabilize the building itself, and that kind of activity could happen immediately and be dealt with as an emergency. The second item on this slide is primarily something that we just simply can't control the timing on, and that's when do we need to snow plow, when does snow removal need to occur. That also would be exempt from the restrictions that I mentioned earlier. As would street sweeping, it's primarily suggested to be exempt because it's much more efficient to do that when there's less traffic on the road. It's also much safer because street sweepers are slow. When they're on high-speed roadways, the differential in speed is the thing that creates additional hazard. Some trash collection would also not be affected by the ordinance restrictions I described a minute ago. And that'd be the trash collection that's away from residential areas, at least 300 feet. There are two more of these explicitly authorized activities, and they're a little more complex. The first is remodel or use of repair and maintenance power equipment. That would not be applied universally. It would only be applied on pre-existing single-family homes, detached homes, and duplexes. So this kind of activity could only occur on pre-existing, that means it already has been built and occupied, single-family detached homes and duplexes. Some examples here that might be helpful are things like a person doing their own remodel work, and yet they have a full-time job during the day on Monday through Friday, so they're doing their work in the evening anyway, probably some on Sundays, but it's restricted to these situations where it's a single-family detached home or a duplex. They may also hire a contractor who has a side business, which is their contracting business, who also may only be available on weekends or evenings. Given that there's some separation from most properties, that seemed to be something that there was interest in allowing to occur. However, the 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. restriction would still apply, so this would not go deeply into the night, but could happen on the weekends. The final explicitly authorized activity would be re-roofing, and those first two letters, that RE, are really important on this. This would not be the first time a roof is put on a brand new building, which would be more of a development project. This would be a re-roof where somebody had hail damage or their roof just got old and they need to replace it. Those are things that ought to happen relatively quickly to protect the property that's below the roof. But again, the 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. restriction would apply, so it would only be a daytime activity, but it might be on a weekend. Let me talk just for a couple of minutes about temporary exemptions, and this is recommended not to change. It's worked pretty effectively. It's relatively tightly controlled. There are multiple considerations that are taken into account, and I'll share some statistics that we talked about last time just to illustrate this. Over the last 3 calendar years, there have been about 5 or 6 of these a month. 95% of them, and that's a calculated number, were due to the fact that the work needed to happen on a major street. And major streets have major traffic during the rush hours, and so the good construction period gets pretty narrow during the daytime to avoid that rush hour traffic. And oftentimes it's so narrow that things are very inefficient or simply can't be completed in that amount of time if you think about underground work and the excavation and the pipe replacement and the refill of the trench and then the paving. That just sometimes doesn't happen in that period of time. So in those cases, sometimes nighttime exemptions have occurred. Those are a couple of good examples. In the other 5% of the cases, it's things that generally really there's not a choice but to have a longer or extended construction period. A couple of examples. When sanitary sewers are replaced, so they're operating sanitary sewers, the sewage can't just be stopped, and so it has to be pumped up onto the surface, not onto the surface, on a pipe that lays on the surface, and then back into the pipe underground. And that pump has to run 24 hours a day, so it's an exemption that does occur occasionally. Thankfully, pump technology has produced much quieter devices than once we had. Another example of that circumstance would be the something such as a really large concrete pour where there's a large building. An example I think was the parking structure at the Lakewood Wadsworth Light Rail Station. There was a very large concrete pour that simply took longer than the work hours would normally allow. So those things happen. They're unavoidable, but they're rare. And that's kind of how we look at these exemptions today and would continue, that we consider all the factors that are involved. We're a bit, I'm not sure stingy is the right word, but we're pretty tight about these, and we don't allow them for just anything that's convenient. But when they do need to happen, we try to be really practical and efficient in getting those issued, so it doesn't cause a lot of consternation for anybody and doesn't cause construction projects to get extended. So we would, and the ordinance does include retaining those provisions. And the last thing I'll talk just for a moment about is construction traffic routing. Today, there's very little restriction that the city can apply to where construction traffic goes. And this may be big equipment, it may be hauling materials in and out. The only thing that we have the authority to restrict is when soil is being hauled away from a site. That's obviously not the only time when there's repetitive construction-related traffic. So the proposal is to expand that to any kind of construction equipment and materials, but we also recognize that we can't completely eliminate construction activity next to residential areas, partly because many of our arterial streets have residential areas immediately adjacent, and the arterial streets, of course, are the best bet. So we will try to and prefer to limit the activity on adjacent residential streets, and prefer to use those arterial streets when it's reasonable, but we also need to have reasonable expectations, which is that we can't prevent that. So this will be used when it needs to be to deal with a particular problem. We won't probably require a particular construction routing plan and approval on every single project because most work pretty well, but there are some where, particularly where there's quite a bit of trucking that needs to happen, that some additional restrictions could be helpful in reducing the impact on the neighborhoods. The last slide then is just to take you back to the specific amendment that you asked to have available with tonight's ordinance. And that was this. You asked that we go ahead and include all city recognized holidays, which are the 9 that are listed on the slide before you, and that's what we've done in the ordinance today. The potential amendment that was indicated as a possible change tonight would be to reduce that list somewhat. And so here's some language. If you choose to do that, all you have to do is read it and fill in the blank with the ones that you do not want to have on the list. So whatever is put in that blank, construction will be allowed. So for instance, if Labor Day is put in the blank on an amendment, then construction would be allowed on Labor Day, but not the other holidays. As we spoke with folks in the industry, the 3 that tend to have work occurring on them fairly routinely are Martin Luther King Jr. Day, President's Day, and Veterans Day. Of course, every company makes their own decisions on those things, so that's certainly not a universal answer, but that tends to be the case. And I'll leave that slide up there should it become helpful, and be happy to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchison. I believe I referred to you as Director of Planning. You are the Director of Public Works.
There was a time.
That is true. There was a time. All right. So I will now open public comment, and Miss Heidi Williams is going to scoot on down. Take your time. And it's all that's wished to speak. If you would like to address this issue, please jump on down and come see Margie, please. Good evening. You know, we haven't approved scooters yet in Lakewood.
Well, I'll get out as quickly as I can before I'm arrested. Hi, as you all know, I'm Heidi Williams with the Home Builders Association. Obviously wanted to just come and put our comments in on this. Most of this we are fine with. The biggest thing for us, of course, is not being able to operate on Sundays and holidays. We don't often operate on Sundays and major holidays, but occasionally there's emergency work that we might find out about on Saturday when your cities aren't open to give us waivers. We might be receiving materials. We might be wanting to limit traffic during peak hours. We might have weather delays we're trying to make up for, and maybe sensitive operations to protect human life that was mentioned earlier in the presentation. I did some research, and 9 of the major Front Range communities do not prohibit construction on Sundays. Broomfield does shorten their time by about 3 hours on Sundays, but I could not find anything around us, any city around us, that does prohibit this work on Sundays or holidays. We also have projects that need to be uninterrupted. I guess in this case, a waiver might work, but large concrete work, dewatering, and culvert work are some of the examples. Also, if you have to move subcontractors around, a lot of times that will not delay us by one day, but that could delay us by weeks, trying to move everybody around because our subcontractors do have busy schedules as well. So again, the waivers are really nice, but again, not always able to predict when we're going to need that Sunday work or that holiday work. So we would really just ask you all to consider not stopping our work on Sundays, but maybe if you really wanted to condense the hours or something like that, that might be more favorable and more helpful so that you're not having projects extend out longer than they need to. So that's really part of the problem with that. And we are in favor of the streamlining of the hours. We think that makes it a lot easier for everybody involved to know when they can, in fact, do business. So we do like that part. And also just kind of keeping in mind that that first and last hour is usually just the setup and cleanup. And so hopefully you'll allow that in that first and last hour. So that's all I have for you tonight, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you coming out. Anybody else? All right, I'll close public comment on the hearing. We'll go to council comments and questions. So I just have a couple. One, this ordinance doesn't address residential construction versus commercial, correct?
That's correct. It doesn't make that distinction. The existing ordinance also doesn't make the distinction, but it applies differently in residential zone districts as opposed to commercial zone districts. And now that we have mixed use districts, that became impractical.
Okay. Because I have some concerns about that, and I understand the residential part, but commercial is a lot different. And case in point, you have something that's being built at CCU that's completely wrapped at this point. And according to our ordinance, if they needed to do work on that building, which is somewhat isolated from residential, has Alameda Parkway, which probably creates more noise next to it, they would be prohibited from working on Sundays.
The way it's drafted, that's correct.
Okay. I know that. Yes. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay. So that is one of the concerns, and I think the general intent of this ordinance is good in trying to make sure we find a balance, but I'm afraid of the unintended consequences that come with that sort of prohibition. And I guess there is an opportunity for a waiver, which is good. The next part would be if there was a need, if there was construction going on a Saturday, for some reason there was a need to continue that to a Sunday, we don't have a mechanism in place to grant that through the city offices because the city's not in the office on Saturdays. So I think those are a couple of things I'd hope council would take into consideration as we move through this. Councilor Harrison?
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that as we were going through this process, the one thing that I don't see in this ordinance is how do we enforce it? Who enforces it, and with what? Do we have fines? I mean, what are we going to do if somebody offends here?
Let me take a run at that, and then we'll see if I get corrected or not. The Public Works Department does all the front-end work related to that. Ultimately, if necessary, it's a violation of the municipal code, and the police department could issue a citation. That's not our goal. That's not a great use of police resources, and we very rarely involve the police department in any of these kinds of situations. We really start on the front end with some education. We try to make sure that folks understand what the rules of the game are, and that's not just related to noise, but all kinds of activity around construction. Then we have construction inspectors who visit the sites periodically. They're certainly not there continuously, and they get a sense for how these things are going and try to do some education on the site as well. If there is a violation, we have the option to issue a stop work order, which does just that. This is an interesting one and not one that necessarily would fit with a stop work order, because with a stop work order, generally you're preventing some kind of work until they fix a problem. Well, this problem is fixed once the violation ends, so it's not like they have to do some activity in order to end it. So that's probably not a tool that we would use very often. But if necessary, and that would be a tool we would use before we would go to the police department. I'm going to ask City Engineer Ann Hine if she has anything to add to that.
I think that covers most of it. In some cases, we've had contractors who repeatedly don't follow directions. And in that case, we'll bring them in and sit them down and talk to them. And we have ways of, it's threatening action, essentially, and that usually gets their attention. But sometimes it's a repeated education process.
I had no idea we had an enforcer in the planning department, so I'm getting it. Okay. What about, one other question that I had was, in our original study session, I think that there was a discussion about some of the commercial buildings that might have painting, carpeting, et cetera, being done on the weekends. And that really still, because I'm a business owner, I would just as soon have that work done on the weekends. It's relatively quiet. That wouldn't necessarily affect the residences. And I have a real hard time telling someone not to do that work, because now that impacts my business. So is there something we can do there?
That kind of work doesn't require a permit and doesn't usually fall within the ordinance in any event. So carpeting, painting, surface treatments, we wouldn't issue a permit and we wouldn't require an exemption.
However, there's going to be a work truck sitting outside of that building on a Sunday, and that's going to probably cause somebody to call.
It may, but it probably isn't generating any noise. It probably isn't generating a lot of disruption, so it may go unnoticed.
That's what I'm hoping.
And even if it's noticed, we'll explain what's required and what's not required. In those cases, since there's not a permit required, there's not going to be an impact from noise and not something that we would enforce these kinds of ordinances on.
I'm going to ask the non-politically correct question. Is this ordinance enforceable? Can we actually enforce this the way it's written right now?
Yes, I think we can. And ultimately, if we had to, the police department would do that. Again, we don't want to use their resources, so we do the things that Ann described and I described. But yes, I'm comfortable that it can be. You?
Okay.
Yes, Councilor, just with the acknowledgement that noise complaints, whether it's construction noise or something else, are sort of in that category of things that are transient and they're difficult to prove. If someone says, I heard too much noise this morning coming from there, and the owner says, no, you didn't, that's a difficult thing to document and to chronicle. So with that acknowledgement, it is enforceable.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things. Since this is called a construction noise ordinance, I would just like to point out that I do have a request for council action regarding our noise ordinance. And the language that is used causes unreasonable noise, which is neither measurable nor enforceable. So that kind of backs up what you're talking about, Councilor. And hopefully I think we're going to be hearing that council action in about a month. Because also none of our police or court enforcers have decibel meters. So when you can't measure noise, I don't know how you can enforce it. Also, I did turn in a motion that we look at changing the hours that we've already got in here from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if somebody really needs to go later than that, they can get a waiver. But the reason that we're even dealing with this is that we've had some bad players. And I would like to see us have something in place that kind of helps our residential neighborhoods a little bit better. And so I'd like to make that motion.
Okay.
I guess there's no seconds.
Oh, no. We haven't.
I don't know how you do that.
We haven't read it in yet, so we'll come back.
Also, and I'm happy to move to amend the motion to delete from section 3 of the ordinance, Martin Luther King Presidents and Veterans Day. I think that's really reasonable. So, and I didn't write that, but it's.
Okay.
What? It's already written. Yeah, there you go.
Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. So during this kind of education process that you're talking about up front, do you talk about, if there's an emergency, you can have an exemption for an emergency, or is that understood?
Most of the emergencies are ones that have to be responded to by organizations that routinely deal with emergencies, and they're not inclined to delay their response at all. And so it's never, I don't recall it ever being an issue. In the case that I gave of the example of a building being hit by a vehicle, it's the police department that calls one of our building inspectors who goes out in the middle of the night, and they try to do an assessment at that time of at least making the building site safe. So we're involved in those with the water lines and those kinds of utility breaks. The utility companies are used to dealing with emergencies and know that we want them to fix those right away as well.
So in that case, then, I guess I'm trying to understand if there's an emergency, it's on a Sunday, it's a plumbing or an electrical issue, and there isn't city staff around. How is that going to work?
You want to touch on that?
If it's an issue in a building and it's that kind of emergency, then the building code actually covers that, and the building owner or tenant is allowed to make the correction and come in for a permit the next business day.
Okay, great. So, okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then let's see. All of the road exemptions will just continue as is. And then the other question that I have is, I think that when we were originally working on this, our main concern was about the loud, heavy construction going on. And then, we kind of broke out this second section of if you're doing repair or maintenance power equipment, and the definition, we came up with is, or maybe you came up with, we came up with together, lawnmowers, power garden tools, electric chainsaws, leaf blowers, power hand tools. So this is, kind of signaling we're not doing major construction, we're doing just repair and maintenance. So I just had a concern about that we're only allowing that on Sundays for the single family detached homes and duplexes. The reason why is, let's say you have a multifamily building, or the other examples of what a residential use is: nursing homes, hotels, motels, schools, homes for the aged, hospitals. These are all things that, in my experience, people want to see those things well kept up. And so the goal was not to prevent, repair and maintenance of these facilities that may often occur on the weekends. And so I don't want to have the unintended consequence of, for many people, Sundays is the time that you're able to get to these kind of repairs, or Saturdays. And so I think that we may want to look into just amending it, so that we allow routine, maintenance and repair. This is not heavy construction in any of the residential uses, so that we, are making it easy to maintain your properties. I personally get more complaints about weeds than I do about the sound of a lawnmower. That's just my experience. And I also noticed in the request Lakewood description here, we have the list of the, there's a handful, it's 12, 20 or so concerns in 3 years. But none of them were related to lawnmowers or leaf blowers. So that would be my request. And then the other reason that I'd like to see that is just, you mentioned in here we have the bond dollars coming into Lakewood for our schools. They mentioned lawn maintenance on the weekdays. But I don't know if they're going to be, are the schools exempt from our laws? Are they?
Schools can kind of do what they want, can't they?
I'm hoping our city attorney will help me, but schools are exempt from our building code requirements. So when they get a building permit, they don't get it from the city, they get it from the state. But that doesn't necessarily exempt them from all city requirements. I'm not sure I can draw the line more clearly than that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Mr. Hutchison's right that for building and zoning purposes, there are exemptions and different processes under state law for schools.
Thank you.
So they will not have to follow this.
Yeah. No, I don't believe this would fall under the exemptions. They're specific to, again, land use issues, zoning issues, where you can operate a school and what permission you need to open one up or construct one. So they should be subject to the same requirements.
So they will follow this.
Well, we hope so.
Okay, or that is our intent, and they should. Okay, so anyway, the point is, I think that our schools we should exempt them from this, the routine repair and maintenance and power equipment, as I have droned on about for a while now. So that's all. And then the last thing I want to say is just, I do think I have concerns too about how this is going to impact our. Mayor Paul mentioned commercial versus residential. We will have the most strict one, it sounds like, in the Denver metro area. And I think we just need to be prepared to look back on this and see if we are having unintended consequences, so that we can make any modifications if we need to.
Councilor Franks?
Thanks, Mayor Paul. Well, I'm sure those on here can imagine that since I brought this forth, I have a lengthy list, so I'll try to be quick and efficient. First, I wanted to say thanks to staff. I mean, this is obviously an important issue, and so I really appreciate all the effort that went into that, and thanks to Mr. Hutchinson for looking back through his notes and giving me some clarity on a couple points today. I did want to start out by saying that I absolutely would support those 3 holidays, Martin Luther King, Presidents, and Veterans. I think that's reasonable. I did also want to, really toot our horn. I think Lakewood is a leader. And I think that just because other municipalities on the Front Range, that is not a reason for me not to take bold action. And if you Google search and find out there are municipalities and large counties, LA County manages to restrict Sundays quite well. You got San Carlos, Belmont, I mean, the list goes on. Tampa does some creative things. There's all kinds of communities that do this. I did want to talk about the commercial activity and school facilities. I mean, they should be under, when you're talking about maintenance, they should be under a professional facilities maintenance plan. To think that they are not planning well for those facilities and using resources during regular business hours sort of says to me that maybe they're not managing their business or their resources well. These other communities certainly manage to do that rather well. I do think that, though, a look-back period is a healthy thing. I think it's a healthy thing that, unintended consequences can crop up. So I would definitely support let's gather some data, let's see what it looks like. I'm certainly open to that if someone wants to make that motion. I did want to say, as a project manager, hearing about how we may be impacting projects have timelines, projects have man-hour limitations, projects have other resourcing. It is not a one lever that suddenly makes or breaks a project. For every planning effort, you're determining high risk, medium risk, low risk activities, and you're mitigating your risk by planning things that are high risk towards the beginning of the week. I mean, these things are not insurmountable. So I just want to say, from a project manager standpoint, it does make the projects manager's job a little bit harder, but we get paid to sort those things out. I also wanted to talk about one of the main reasons why we brought this forward is we have communities that are being inundated with construction activities, which is not just the noise. It is the soil moving and the dust from that, engine fumes, all kinds of things. And right now we offer our community zero respite, none. And it can start as early as 6 a.m. and complete as late as 10 p.m. If we, obviously we've pulled those margins in a little bit on this particular ordinance, which it sounds like there might be an amendment to that. But I believe it is the right thing to do to give our communities some respite. So they have a day in which that they are not being inundated by these activities that also enhance our communities. We welcome these new buildings and things that they bring into the community. Not every project is welcomed at the same level, but certainly, we appreciate that economic growth for those areas. So I think that unintended consequences can be addressed through a look back. I think that good planning. I would like to hear if Councillor Johnson is going to propose the 7 to 7. I think that doesn't sound unreasonable to me, but certainly want to hear the dialogue from everyone to see that, and certainly encourage you to, if you've got some concerns and you've all got your iPads, for those of you that do, just look and see. There is a plethora of communities for which the Sunday is a prohibited, and those communities are thriving very well with that. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Abel.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good presentation. I especially like the way y'all anticipated some of our questions and had really good answers for them. In fact, a lot of our questions. I do want to make sure that we are addressing the idling supply trucks that often pull up at midnight or 2 a.m. and idle and unload machinery or equipment, materials. Are we covering those kind of activities?
Yes, the time restriction applies to something we've defined as construction, and we've defined that very broadly, so that I think those things are covered.
Okay. Would like to ask if landscaping is considered construction, or landscape maintenance is considered construction noise and would be covered by this.
Landscape maintenance would probably fit in the repair or maintenance power equipment definition, separate from construction. So where there's a distinction made in the ordinance, it would apply in that instance.
And I'd like to point out there's a lot of difference between a dozen folks with chainsaws trying to clear a site and the guy in the middle of the block cutting down a couple of limbs from the old oak tree. Also, there was an inference that people would complain when no offense is occurring. I think that's a pretty rare thing in Lakewood, just because there's obviously work going on in some building on Sunday. I'm not sure folks would complain about that without reason. As far as schools, Mr. Cox, doesn't our noise ordinance already exempt schools by specifically mentioning an exemption from schools in the noise ordinance?
I think you're correct about that, Councilor. I was thinking about the state law on construction of schools and wasn't Thank you.
So we could continue that, we could end that, we could apply that exemption to some things and not others. But in any case, we have a provision that will.
That is in the noise ordinance.
Already protect the schools.
Could be subject to amendment, yep.
I support the holidays, the removal of those 3 holidays. I think we have adequately covered the Saturday into Sunday questions. Thank you, Ms. Hine. And, I agree with Councilwoman Franks that we need a respite. You can't sit in your backyard if there's a earth mover back there kicking up dust and making noise and possibly even throwing things out from behind it in the with its wheels. So I'm all for this. I might accept some amendments, but I think the concept is great, and I think it gives our nice, quiet town. The reason we moved here is for the serenity of Lakewood, and I think this would add to it. Thank you.
Councilor Skilling.
First, thank you to my fellow councilor Franks for spearheading this. And I think this was a long time coming, and I think she did a great job of moving this through. I think the look back could be important for some things that we've already heard. For example, I would be curious when we do the look back as to the violations and the enforcement. We have many ordinances where a first offense gets you something, the second gets you something more, and what's behind door 3 you probably don't want to see. So we may need to do that. If it's just not working and they're thumbing our noses and saying, what's Lakewood going to do about it? Maybe that's something we could look at. Same, I think, goes for the times. I think maybe and obviously we haven't heard the specific amendment yet, but this is a significant change. So maybe right now we stick with the times and go with the theme of maybe we don't make any amendments on the fly tonight, other than maybe a couple of these on holidays or something. But maybe that's something we look at if we need to constrict the times. And I will buck the trend, and I am in favor of keeping all of the all-city recognized holidays in place and not in favor of this potential amendment on the screen. Thank you.
So I would just say if we dropped from 7 to 7, you're losing 2 hours a day, which is 12 hours during a week. So that's a day plus of work, and you're already dropping a Sunday. So keep that in mind, what that does. Again, I would echo, nobody wants to be around a earth mover moving all the time. I do see from our research, complaints are very, very rare as to these issues. So I do get concerned about unintended consequences, and the state has blue laws where you couldn't buy a car, couldn't buy alcohol, and now you potentially can't work on Sundays in the city of Lakewood. I don't know if that's the right trend. Certainly, again, I echo, I understand, but this respite idea, what about the people that work at night and are home during the day, or the people that work on the weekends and have the weeks off, right? So you're not going to be able to accommodate everybody, and these projects come and go. And if you look at the fact-based driven of our complaint system for this, I worry about making laws that are kind of reactionary and not really big picture. And to say, yeah, so I really am wrestling with this. I'm anxious to hear what some of the amendments might look like. But I think that we have to keep a lot of different things in mind. And again, if it's multifamily residential, which is a lot of what these projects are that people are concerned about, then that's one thing. But if this is businesses, and I still don't see the clarity in if it's a remodel, I don't see that it has to be a new permit unless you take that in account under the definition. So when you look at the definition, construction, erection, demolition, assembling, altering, or installing of buildings. So altering could be carpentry work with inside of a building that's framing or changing things. And I certainly understand that Councilor Franks is probably very thorough in her project management, but this is an industry that could be coordinating up to 20 different subs in different areas, and you have weather, you have a lot of different things that you can't predict. And so I think there needs to be a better way, at least on the Sundays, if something needs to happen, if you have a spillover from a Saturday, to be able to engage in those efforts. Councilor LeBaire.
Thank you. I totally agree with the sentiment behind this proposal, but I do think some of this language is pretty broad and sweeping. 9.52.150, the repair or maintenance section, to me is a little bit concerning. Frankly, I want to see more repair and maintenance in Ward 2. That's what I'd like to see. So I don't want to discourage that. I want to actually encourage it. And I am worried that some of this is a bit broad and could probably use some changes. Hopefully we can come up with something that might be a little less sweeping to some of these issues. But that's something I'm certainly looking for, because I just think that this is going to potentially apply in a way that has less the unintended consequences that I think some of us are concerned about. So hopefully we can draft something up here for that.
Councilor Bida.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you, Mr. Hutchinson, for your presentation tonight and all the work that you and your staff did on drafting, redrafting. I know how much work that is and how tedious it is, and trying to take all of the stuff that you heard from us over the past months and put it together. So I think you did a marvelous job. I think it's a great compromise, because that's what it is. We're trying to balance the rights and so forth of our contractors and our businesses with the needs of our citizens. And the fact of the matter is that when it comes down to it, we're trying to do something for our citizens. I agree that they need a little break from all of the hustle and bustle that goes on 7 days a week in this city, and it just makes sense to have a day to do that. And again, I mean, we're doing this for our citizens, okay? And I feel like the businesses and the contractors and all, they serve the community too, just like we do. So they're going to have to adjust a little bit at times to help provide those services, and that's all we're really asking them here. So I think it's a great compromise, and I'm in favor of it. I think, and just like it is, I don't like the idea of coming up here on the dais and then spending hours trying to fine tune and make all these amendments on the fly. I think that's a really bad idea. We've got a good basic ordinance here to start with. Let's put it in place. Keep in mind that this is the end of April now, and by the time this actually becomes law, it's going to be another month or more. We might make it in time for Memorial Day. I'm not sure, but the time of the year when people are in the summer, when they want to be out in their backyards enjoying their barbecues and their patios and so forth and so on, and they like to have a little bit of peace and quiet. So I'd like to get this in place so that it's in time for people to enjoy that. If we have to come back at some point at a look back has been suggested, great, let's do that, but let's get this in place. It's great the way it is. I'm in favor of voting for it now and moving on. I think the idea of the three taking out or exempting the 3 holidays that have been suggested, city holidays, is a great idea. Let's do that too. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilor Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I wanted to address a few things, maybe just for the public, that when you look in the packet and you look at our complaint system, that we did ask, and the numbers are low in that system. There's reasons for that. Many people don't know about it until I educate them about that, so they don't know it's there. But I want to assure you that the numbers of calls, texts, emails, in-person complaints that Councilor Skilling and I have received has been extensive. So I just wanted to kind of set that aside, that those numbers don't reflect it out, but there's a lot of reasons for that. Also, I want to make sure people understand that when I'm looking at a project, the stakeholders are including the public. So anybody who's going to be impacted positively or negatively about something is a stakeholder. And this is a way for us to get some benefits for those stakeholders, the public, the folks who, basically pay our salary. And I love our businesses and certainly want them to thrive, but also this is about protecting our citizens as well. I did want to talk about also where it said projects come and go. For some of the short ones, that's true, but other ones, they're 2.5 years long, multi-phased. So if you're saying that someone, they're going to come and go, if you're the one who it's your house and it's 7 days a week for 2 years, and there's ebbs and flows. Some days are going to be obviously more intense than others, but I think that those projects people lose sight of. Not every project is going to be a quick project. And the other thing I did want to say is while I'm open to that look back period, I'll be very judicious in what amendments I'm willing to sign on to tonight, because no one brought anything to me. No one called me, no one emailed me, no one asked to sit down, and I'm not going to be comfortable legislating from the dais. I mean, we can have those conversations, we can sit down, but no one reached out to me to say, hey, here's something I'd like to bring forward. And as the person who kind of brought this forward, I would have expected maybe to hear from them, considering that it's been in the packet since the first reading, 10 days before that. So we're talking about nearly a month for folks to have looked at over, to have brought in their concerns forward. And I didn't hear any, which then doesn't give me a chance to research and look at things like reducing those hours for 2 hours. I'm concerned about that because those man hours are critical to getting work done. So that is a lot of man hours if you have a crew of 50, losing 2 hours. So again, I just have some concerns there, and but wanted to kind of share all that additional information, that this hasn't been something that's been quick. We've certainly talked about it a lot, and we are certainly reacting to demands in the community. Thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. I'd just like to respond. You and I did have conversation today about the Sundays only. And at that time, I did bring up to you about 7 and 7. So you have had some input regarding that. Okay, I just want to clarify that.
Okay, so I'm gonna, I've been asked to take a break for 5 minutes so folks can figure out language. And so we'll do that and come back in about 5 minutes. I'd like to reconvene the Lakewood City Council meeting April 22nd at 9:32 p.m. I'm going to ask Mayor Pro Tem Abel to read a motion.
I move for the adoption of ordinance O 2019-19 on second and final reading.
I second.
Okay, so let's start with some amendments. Councilor Johnson's first amendment would be to change construction hours to read between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. That's Councilor Johnson's first motion. Is there a second? Second. Okay. We have a motion, a second. Councilor Franks, did you wish to speak to that motion? Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say for me personally, I'd be more comfortable looking at this in a look back, just because when I kind of calculate, and let's say you have a 100-man work crew and you're cutting it by 2 hours a day, that's 200 man hours across a week. From a project management standpoint, I can start to just see how that really does offer an additional constraint to a project. But I certainly think that it is a discussion point during the look back, because what we may learn is that it's the rare person who goes past 7 o'clock, or there's other things. So and again, I didn't have time to research it to see maybe what that impact would look like. So for me tonight, I can't support it, but certainly would love it to be part of the look back discussion.
And I will not be supporting. I think when I did my math, if it was correct, it chops basically another day off. Councilor Johnson?
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're all here tonight dealing with this ordinance because there's been some bad actors, and we all know which ones we're talking about. So that's why we have to legislate sometimes. Unfortunate. I certainly understand that contractors have deadlines to meet. They have hours. They need to get a project done. I get that. I also understand for the people that are adjacent in residential neighborhoods next to these larger projects, 12 hours a day, especially in the summertime when you go out on your patio and like to have some peace and quiet at 7, having them continue till 9 o'clock and doing it for 14 hours, I have trouble with that. And certainly I would like to have a fallback so that a contractor can get a variance, can get a waiver. I'm not sure what the correct terminology. And if they really need to do this, to get that project done, I think everybody understands that we need to have a fallback. My sensitivity, frankly, is for the homeowners and not for the developers. Thank you.
So there's a motion and a second for the changing 7 to 9 to 7 to 7. Please cast your votes. And that fails 8-3. The nays being Paul, Gutwein, Skilling, LeBeer, Vincent, Beta, Franks, Harrison. Councilor Johnson's second amendment would amend the days to exclude Martin Luther King, President's Day, and Veterans Day. Is that correct?
That is correct. And frankly, in fairness to the contractors, to have so many city holidays, I think, is unreasonable. And these particular holidays, I think in fairness to them, we need to pull them out. So.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please.
For clarification, is that if the yes vote on the motion is to pull out the 3 and a no would be to leave it as is? Am I correct? Thank you.
Correct. Correct. Do you need more clarification? Could you just repeat that? Yep. So the motion would be, a yes vote would be to amend and remove Martin Luther King Jr. Day, President's Day, and Veterans Day. That would be a yes vote. A no vote would keep that in there with New Year's Day, Martin Luther King President's Memorial, Independence, Labor, Veterans, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Cool. Please cast your votes. And that passes 9 ayes, 2 nays, the nays being Paul and Skilling. Don't confuse me. Okay, motion number 3, or amendment number 3, would come from Councilor LeBeer. Well, this does not look like you're writing. Would move to amend 9.52.153, exceptions B, from single-family detached or duplex to residential use. So is there a second? And then I'd like to see if you would.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Please explain.
Thank you. The reason I added that was because I thought it was a little bit broad and concerning that multifamily use apartments or condos weren't included in this exemption. For example, I live in a condo complex. The person who mows my lawn, or the company that mows our lawn, is done by our HOA. Our HOA is one of our neighbors, and he's the one who manages all of that. And this just seems like drawing the line and distinction between single family and multifamily. It just seemed like it was a little less than inclusive. I thought a better way to approach it would just be make the difference or the separation between residential and commercial, and hopefully that makes sense to everyone.
Okay. Is there any questions, Councilor Gutwein?
I agree, and I think we should I will be supporting this amendment. I think that, the intent that we had when we started this was really to, like we've all been saying, give the community a break from construction noise and heavy construction. But again, we're talking about mowing lawns, and I think that the research that I did and looked at some of the examples of other cities, and Councilor Franks is correct, there are cities in California that do have an exemption, that prohibit construction on Sunday, but I couldn't find an example of one that prohibits doing yard work on Sunday. And so I just feel that this is maybe going a little bit further and is a little away from what the original goal was. And then it just, on a personal note, kind of bothers me if we legislate in a way that gives, if you can do yard work on a Sunday if you live in a single family home, but you can't if you live in a multifamily home. And I know that many of them are owned by businesses, but many are not. They could be owned by, I'm not saying that was anyone's intent to do that. I don't think it was in any way. I think that's kind of what we're doing. And so, yeah, I will be supporting that.
Okay. Councilor Franks to the motion.
So at this point, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just, because I don't get a chance to do any of my research and it's too difficult to do that from up here, I won't be supporting it, not because I don't think it doesn't have some merit, but I think that it can be looked at in the look back period. We can certainly, during our ward meetings, we can reach out to say, have we done something that's going to cause undue harm? So I don't know if we are or we aren't, but it's going to be important, not just for this particular one, but anybody who brings something forth. If we've got these kinds of modifications, we all need to be able to do our research. Just legislating from the dais on the fly just feels to me like I can't support it, even though it may have good value. If I could have researched it ahead of time, I might have been in support of it, but I won't be supporting this motion.
Councilor Skilling.
I apologize. I was listening to that, so I lost my train of thought. But the issue seems to be in 153 on B, and I guess I'll just ask this as a question, does the amendment leave in the word remodel, or are we just talking about lawnmowers and leaf blowers? Because that would be the repair or maintenance power equipment piece. But the first part of B says remodel. So there's a distinction. If we're going to say that we're really trying to not do away with lawnmowers and such, I think that might be a far more basic amendment if we get rid of the remodel, the words remodel and. Because the intent of this is to go to construction and remodeling and not to lawnmowers. So if you got rid of the remodel and part of that, then I think the amendment as presented would make more sense in that context. Because then I believe if you took out remodel and you left in repair or maintenance power equipment, all that would do as an amendment would get rid of the leaf blowers, log chippers, and power hand tools, and related garden tools. So I could kind of see that amendment. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't know what that means, but I could throw that as, I guess, an amendment to an amendment, perhaps.
Mayor, may I add a bit?
Yes, please.
And partly an apology to Councilors Gutwein and LeBure. The remodel definition does include items that do not require a permit. The definition does. So the paint, internal paint issue is not an issue. And I had forgotten that when we talked about that earlier this evening. So I think we're well covered there. One option that perhaps you'll want to consider is to break B into two parts. One is remodel, if you want to continue to allow somebody to remodel their house in these with broader flexibility. And then the second one would be, as Councilor Skilling was saying, repair and maintenance power equipment, and maybe apply that to the broader residential use group. So to create two instead of just one category that is currently B. That would be an option.
Well, no, so I was looking at the motion maker in the second. Do you want to withdraw those, or do you want to noodle on that? And I'll just keep going, and you can think about that. Mayor Pro Tem Abel?
I agree with Councilman Skilling on the remodeling of multifamily apartments. That usually involves a lot more noise and activity. But as far as lawnmowers and leaf blowers go, those are parts of the sounds of neighborhoods in the evening or on Sundays. So I have no problem with that at all, as long as they're not out there on a tractor with a brush hog.
Well, it depends where that multifamily could be, sir. Councilor Harrison?
I'll let you guys figure the wordsmithing out, but I want to protect remodel for ownership, whether it's a townhouse, a condo, a home, a duplex, a single family. If it's remodel, we need to allow those owners to be able to do that when on the Sundays. So if we can figure out a way to protect that, I can support this.
Councilor Gutwein?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I do appreciate the difference here between the remodel and the repair equipment and repair or maintenance power equipment. I think that for me, the same argument applies for keeping the ability to remodel. And we're talking about non-permit work. So this is, replacing carpet or, Jay, could you help me out with some examples of what non-permit work would be?
Sure, and I should be clear, that's one part of remodel, and it's painting, it's surfaces on the walls, whatever you put on the walls, it's carpeting, floor covering, that sort of thing. But remodel also includes in the definition replacing pre-existing features without demolishing an exterior wall. So that might be replacing a sink or some plumbing, or maybe even some electrical work, some of which might require a permit.
Okay, so, but still replacing a sink isn't going to necessarily be a loud, disruptive event. And so I think that, you know, we have a lot of old buildings in Lakewood. We have a lot of old buildings in our neighborhoods, and we have, you know, I just feel that it is important to not make it more difficult to do those kind of, that kind of routine maintenance on your homes, and to, that it should just, you know, for our residential uses, whether it's multifamily or single family, you should be able to do your remodel and paint and replace your carpet and mow your lawn on the weekends. That's the only time that personally we're able to ever get that kind of stuff done, and I know I'm not alone on that. So I think we should keep it remodel and use of repair and maintenance equipment.
To that point, and I would say if you're in a multifamily setting and you have a landlord and you need to have some repairs scheduled, that might be the only time. Could be on the weekends as well, or a Sunday. And I think there is value in that, as I was educated on earlier. It's non-permit type of stuff. Some minor stuff that would need permit, but it's not major construction. So why would we treat a townhome different or a condo different than a single family house? Makes sense. Councilor Skilling.
I was only going to respond to Councilor Harrison's point, and this is part of the problem with doing things on the fly, is that my point was not to prevent people from working on their homes or businesses on the weekend. It was simply addressing this lawnmower conversation that we were having, and it was one suggestion that you could break that off and just address the lawnmower issue separately.
Councilor Franks.
So I'm just going to need someone to help break it down. I'm certainly not trying to, it's just now we're talking about these multifamily, and I can't figure out, are we talking about, you know, I guess I just can't understand exactly what we're saying. And that's, again, the problem from doing it from the dais is we're not all hearing the same thing. But I'm not wanting to prevent people from mowing the lawn. That is the sound of summer, and it doesn't go on forever unless you live next door to a big park. So help me understand what it is we're doing that is possibly causing harm, and that we don't overcorrect the other direction from the dais.
Councilor LeBaire.
So in section B, it specifically talks about for repair and maintenance and remodel. It talks about single family detached homes or completed duplexes as an exemption. By just adding the residential language, we already have a definition within this ordinance that defines residential, and it's more broad and includes all residential properties, not just limited to single family detached homes or duplexes. So it just makes it a little bit more expansive to make sure that all residents get the same exemptions. All residential properties get the same exemptions.
So could it be then a 300-unit apartment? I guess I'm just trying to understand, does this mean if we say that, because those are residential, it could be a 300-unit apartment complex that's having the whole exterior remodeled to modernize it, for example? Is that? So again, I'm just trying to, yeah, I just trying to get good clarity here. Yeah.
It's okay. I'm letting him read.
And this isn't to stump anyone. I just want to make sure we're clear so we know what we're trying to do.
The definition of remodel has two parts. One part is remodeling that does not require demolishing any exterior wall. So the thought is that it's interior work. The second part of that definition is anything that does not require a building permit. So that's redoing the interior walls, putting the carpet down, that kind of thing that we talked about earlier. So remodel gets to one of the points that was made earlier tonight. I can't remember by who or the specific context, that there are some things that happen inside a building that have less impact than things that happen on the outside of a building.
So to that point though, Mr. Hutchison, a 300 unit, if they were doing windows, would be permitted, which would be excluded from Sunday work.
If they were replacing windows, then they don't fit in in this definition remodel. So that'd be construction, which would have all the
Now, if they were
limitations. day of the week.
painting, just like somebody was painting their house, that could be done.
No permit necessary. It
No
could be done.
permit.
And for any building.
Yep. Does that help? Okay. Nice job, Councilor LeBear. Councilor, so I have Councilors Gutwein, LeBear, Franks lit up. Okay, nobody's lit up. Up, Councilor Skilling's up.
So just to be clear, because I'm reading the motion and it, I would want the previously completed language to stay in there. I think that's important. We talked about that at the study session. And I want to be crystal clear because I don't think I'm crystal clear yet. I just want to make sure that this term remodel, because I've just heard from Jay that there was these two definition issues. Where am I finding both definitions?
In section 3 of the ordinance, there's a list of definitions, one of which is remodel.
Yep, I see that one.
So it's two-part.
There's an and about.
Oh, so there's a two-part, it's not, there's not two definitions somewhere. It's just a two-part deal.
Yes.
One is without demolishing the interior or any exterior walls, and then the other is a building permit, which is somewhat redundant, right? Because demolishing a wall would require a permit.
Yes, but the way this is written, you could demolish an interior wall because it's interior, even though it required a permit. So anything that does not require a permit is fine, and things that require a permit but you don't have to demolish the exterior walls is fine.
So it's that second part, I think, that Councilor Franks was alluding to, that, and I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, but there are those jobs inside that may require a permit, but just by the virtue of it being inside. So the 300 unit complex, they decide they're just going to go to town on the interior on a Sunday. They could do that as long as they stay with it, no matter how much noise they make, no matter how many power tools they're using. They can go to town as long as they're staying within the confines of their building. Is that what we're saying?
If the amendment passes, yes.
If it doesn't require a building
No, that's not correct. See, that's the issue, is that it's the building permit is always something that you can't do, right? But there are certain circumstances where normally it would require a building permit and you couldn't do it, but just by virtue of it being enclosed, not affecting the exterior walls, you could demolish every non-load bearing wall. Well, actually, you could do load bearing too. So every wall in the interior of this building you could deconstruct and make as much racket as possible.
That's the way this definition is written, yes.
And I just wanted to be crystal clear on that part, because the second part, the requiring the permit, if it didn't require a permit, you should be able to do it. That makes sense. But the first part seems a bit ambiguous if our only definition is this exterior wall definition. So I'm just pointing that out, and I think that's where Councilor Franks was going.
What do you do?
Councilor Vincent.
Oh, sorry.
What?
Can you make an amendment or something? Because that is a valid point. If I remember the discussion too, that's why we originally put in there single family detached and whatever the other one is. So we wouldn't run into this about 300 or 100 apartment complexes doing work on Sundays, Saturdays after 9. There was a lot of discussion around that.
Can I ask what problem we're running into? I mean, this has to do with construction of new construction, major construction. I mean, if we're setting different standards for residential versus commercial, it doesn't seem equitable. So I'm really confused, because this seems to bring some sort of level playing field to all of our residential structures. Whether you're a 4-plex, a 300-plex, a 1-plex, you all have this opportunity to do routine type maintenance. So we're saying a homeowner can do this, any day of the week, but because you live in an apartment, you can't do it any day of the week? Right? I thought this was geared towards more of the heavy-duty construction issues that you've mentioned and have seen those issues and those complaints. Mayor Pro Tem Abel?
I think the issue goes more to being able, as you were talking about, if an individual apartment dweller wants to paint or replace panes in a window or whatever, I don't think that's affected. What Mr. Skilling's talking about is the owner of the apartment project deciding he's going to do a major remodeling effort on Sunday, as opposed to someone replacing a little paint or drywall or something like that in an apartment, or a apartment owner coming in and doing those minor repairs that don't involve huge numbers of folks coming in trucks and wielding sawzalls.
So I certainly understand that. So there's a place you can get to that clarity, and I hope that that's what you just said you found.
Yeah, okay, so I don't know where, again, I was clarifying an issue. I don't know if where we got off topic here. All I was identifying was there was an ambiguity here that I think is resolved if you just get rid of the first part of the sentence and simply define remodel as any work for which a building permit is not required by Title 14 of this municipal code. That would allow everything that everyone's been talking about: carpet, painting, all the stuff. And for every type of building, a commercial building, a multi-family building, a single building, whatever, all residential uses. So nobody's talking about dividing single family against condos against commercial. Everyone can do it. You just get rid of the first part of that sentence and it makes a heck of a lot more sense. That's all I was trying to get to.
So Mr. Hutchinson, then that would have the inverse then on those issues for a homeowner who wanted to do plumbing type of things, right? Yeah.
It would.
So
at the risk of making this harder, but perhaps making it simpler, going back to Councilor LeBure's opening point, I think was that the routine maintenance kind of things could happen on any residential property on a weekend, and that may be normal for a variety of reasons and doesn't sound quite as objectionable as some of the other things that I've been hearing. So perhaps the error is in the fact that whoever drafted this included in B both remodel and the use of repair and maintenance equipment. So what if instead of B we had two things? We'll call it B and C for a minute, not excluding the C that's already there, but just to divide B. If let's leave B alone. Let's just, if we were to edit B so that it said remodel on any property containing a previously completed single-family detached, et cetera. So the remodel would only be allowed on the single-family homes and duplexes, which is the point I think the mayor just made. And then we had another subsection, capital letter, that only dealt with use of repair or maintenance power equipment, and it applied to all residential uses.
is that what?
Well,
So go on.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor. I think that's close, but then we were also talking about being able to do your basic home remodels in a multifamily home. So we do want to do that. I think that was our, Jacob and my intent. Do you, to Councilor Skilling's point about the getting the permit, building permit, are there other common home repairs besides plumbing, for example, that require a building permit in your own home?
Fences.
Changes to electrical, changes to plumbing, Changes, yeah, any kind of system repair or replacement. So water heater or furnace would require a permit. Changes to walls, even if they're not load bearing, there's a requirement for a framing inspection as well as drywall inspection. So the only things that don't require permits currently are paint, flooring, except if it's a shower pan floor, that requires a permit and an inspection. But typically carpet, vinyl flooring, that kind of thing would not require a permit. In the new building code, window replacements do not require a permit.
Okay. So based on that, I mean, the plumbing and electrical, I still think that whether you live in a multifamily or you live in a single family, you should be able to do that on the weekend. I appreciate the concern about, there could be potentially a really loud remodel of an existing multifamily home, but I think it's going to be pretty unlikely, and I certainly don't think that we're going to be having anyone taking out all the interior walls or whatever the example was. So I think that we can make this modification. We're going to be having a look back. If there are, significant issues from this, we can make that update.
Okay, fair enough. So you're going to stick with your motion in your second. There's still Councilor Skilling, Mayor Pro Tem Abel, and Councilor Harrison. Do you still want to speak to that motion? Councilor Harrison, will you turn your light off, please? Mayor Pro Tem.
There is a large difference between a person and putting a deck on the back of their house or covering that deck, and those kind of things require permits. So does an apartment building putting in decks on 30 ground floor apartments. They're not at all the same and shouldn't be treated the same. My concern is if we go for this uniformity, there are a lot of, we treat multifamily rentals differently in a lot of ways. For instance, we're talking in the trash hauling thing of regulating residential only, and you cannot regulate trash hauling that affects apartment buildings. Isn't that right, Mr. Cox? So there are already those divides between those kind of uses, and I don't see that we would be discriminating against anyone if we allow or perhaps even ownership use of Sundays to do permit work of all kinds, as opposed to allowing a apartment project to do much larger jobs that amount to the same result, more or less.
So to that point, though, a question of clarification, because we only include single family detached or duplex, what does that excludes townhomes?
That's why I mentioned we could make it ownership, as Ms. Harrison suggested.
Unless it's a two townhome building, which are rare.
Councilor LeBaire.
Yeah, I think in public policy, it's hard to make rules for the exception and not just for the general expectations. I think we're going to find nuance everywhere we go on this. So I would just like to move forward with the motion, give it up and down vote, see where people land. Hopefully it passes, because I think it just makes sense. I think it's unlikely that we're going to have a ton of projects doing major remodels of 100 units and interior wall. I think it's not it doesn't have common sense to it, in my opinion. So I'd just like to support moving forward, calling the question and making the vote happen.
And I support that. Well stated. So is everybody clear on the amendment? Yes would add the residential use, no would not.
Yes, sir.
Please cast
Need
your
to vote on calling the question first. To call
I certainly
Call a
understand,
question
but I think he
before.
was meaning let's vote. So do you need a separate vote to call a question, or he just wants to vote?
Let's vote on the
We're
amendment.
voting on the amendment. The amendment to amend 9.52.153, exceptions B from single-family detached or duplex to read residential use. Please cast your votes.
Can you read that again?
To amend 9.52.153, exception B from single-family detached or duplex to residential use. That passes 6 ayes, 5 nays, the nays being Skilling, Abel, Beta, Johnson, Franks. Is there another amendment? So now I'll ask for a motion to approve as amended.
I move for the adoption of ordinance O-2019-19 as amended on second and final reading.
I second.
Yeah, so this is the omnibus. So is there any more comments? There are. Wow. Councilor Harrison.
I just want to make sure that we've got the look-back period qualified in this omnibus, because we just said look back, but I don't know that we said when.
Clarify that.
So the question is, does it need to be in the ordinance, or can we have a legislative intent to take a look back at a date?
Right. You have the ability to decide that a year from now or 6 months or 4 years or whatever, you're going to take another look at it. It's a little more official if it's in the ordinance, but it would be part of the ordinance document. It would not be necessarily codified in the code, depending on the language that you proposed. But you can just decide, all right, we're going to, assuming this passes, we'll have an opportunity to look back at this at any time, and you can decide when that needs to be.
May I add to that I'm not sure that I want to amend the motion, but I think a 2-year look back would be just about right, because a year we'll just barely have time to get the word out to contractors, et cetera, and we probably, being this close to the summer season, won't have much time to educate. Give us 2 years, then I think we might have it. So may I make a strong suggestion for the look back in 2 years?
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Let's hold on, please.
I have an idea.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Abel.
I'd rather have this codified than relying on memory or the intent. So I would move that we amend the motion to require a review after 2 years.
So let's remove the original motion as amended, which would be Mayor Pro Tem Abel, and who seconded that?
Second.
Okay, so
I agree to remove the original motion.
Okay, and so now clear your screens. Please repeat that motion. So the motion is 2 years or a year?
The motion is to review ordinance 02019-19 after 2 years.
Second.
A motion and second. Any discussion? Councilors Franks and Harrison, your lights are on. Okay, Councilor Franks.
While I'm very supportive of the look back, I guess I'm concerned about something saying 2 years out. What if we find that there is something that needs to be addressed? I like to have the flexibility, and I have not found from any of my co-counselors that we have a problem bringing things forward if we think that there's an issue. That just does not seem to be in our DNA. 2 years if we've done something where we couldn't have projected and we need to fix it, I don't think, like I said, this council, I trust that we're going to keep our eyes and ears open, and we're going to bring it back and ask for it to be revisited, or we'll make it a priority at the planning session. Or there's all these opportunities, but codifying it for me and putting a time frame of 2 years doesn't seem like it gives us the flexibility to react to a situation that we may not have anticipated. My 2 cents. So I won't be supporting the 2-year look back.
Mr. Cox.
I believe that the proposed look back would be a mandatory, but it would not preclude an earlier review of whatever issues are going on. I understand why you have that concern, but I don't think it has to say no earlier than 2 years or anything like that. There'll be a sort of a comprehensive review in 2 years. How's everything going with this, whether there have been problems or not? And if a problem arises or there's another reason to look at it before then, you should have that opportunity. You haven't precluded yourself from doing that. And if you had the look,
I appreciate that, because I was thinking that if we did that there would not be the ability to. So still gives the flexibility. Not sure we always need to have all these amendments stacking up and codifying everything. So still may be voting no, but I appreciate the clarification.
Mayor Pro Tem to the motion, and then Councilor Skilling.
There is nothing in any of our ordinances that preclude changing anything, even if there is a review scheduled in the future. If there's not, we can still review it and change it. So,
Councilor Skilling.
You just phrase it that there'd be a look back no later than 2 years, and that would solve the problem.
No. There's already a motion and a second.
I stick by the 2 years.
Okay. Councilor LeBeer.
I'd just like to vote on the motion.
Yeah. Any other discussion?
Is that calling the question, though? We have to do this properly if you...
He's not calling the question, but there's no other lights on.
Okay.
So this is the amendment to have a mandatory look back in 2 years. And that passes 7 ayes, 4 nays, the nays being Paul, Roybal, LeBeer, Franks. Councilor Gutwein?
Just before we vote on this, I just want to...
Do you have a motion yet? Do you have anything else?
Good.
Are there any other motions? Amendments? Thank you. Now I'll ask for a motion.
I again move for the adoption of ordinance O-2019-19 as amended and amended.
I second again.
Okay, motion and second discussion. Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you to Councilor Franks for raising this issue. I think that, our community has certainly been feeling the pressures of growth in the area. I'm hopeful that this will help make it a smoother transition for all of us. And then I also feel comfortable that if we do have significant unintended consequences, that we'll be able to address those together as a body.
All right, any other conversation? Councilor Vincent? No? Okay. All right. Please cast your votes. Passes 10 ayes, 1 nay, the nay being Councilor Roybal. Okay. General business, Mr. Cox. Dave, are you polling yours? Are you polling yours? Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. This is not a listed agenda item. It's just a quick update on something that we talked about not long ago in an executive session. I'll obviously be careful not to disclose anything of confidential nature, but you will recall we did have an executive session regarding the litigation that's pending involving the city and a couple of the Green Tree Metropolitan District and the Jefferson County. And we do need to have a follow-up discussion on that because there were some unsettled matters coming out of that session. So you may be getting a request to check your calendars because of the council meeting schedule coming up. It might have to be at an orthodox time or day. But in the meantime, while that settlement question is pending, and that is, again, the issue, there's a proposed settlement agreement of that litigation, and we need council to take a position on that ultimately. But in the meantime, we became aware of a notice published recently by the Green Tree Metropolitan District, one of the parties to that lawsuit. It concerns some activities in which they intend to undertake, and it's pursuant to a process in the state special district statute that allows a district to say publicly, here we want to do these things in accordance with our service plan, and there's a period of time for interested parties to respond to that notice. We don't really need direction at this point. We just wanted to let you all know that we have received and reviewed that notice. We are not one of the parties that is legally obligated to get that notice because of jurisdictional issues. But we do intend to send a simple response in writing to Green Tree regarding the particular terms in the notice. It won't have any long-term impact on the further discussion about the proposed settlement. That'll all become clearer when we convene again in executive session. So that was just to let you know about that intention.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. And with that said, I think it'd be worthwhile if we potentially had Donna or Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Abel and myself work with council on a date for a executive session to address this further, because that is certainly something that's going to be needed sooner than later.
That's correct.
So if that's amenable to council, our Monday nights are shot, so it may not be on a Monday night. So keep that in mind, but we have to do that, and potentially we could do a doodle poll as well. I know that we don't have a meeting on the 5th Monday, but folks have already indicated that they're out of town, and I don't think our staff will be here either. So those are holidays in the Lakewood staff world too. So much needed respite for our staff. Anything else, Mr. Cox? No. And then there was a topic for upcoming agenda, Councilor Skilling.
The Development Dialogue Committee had submitted a request that this body engage in the beginning of the parking management program post haste and take a look at what it would take to start that right away, start the process. At the request of the city manager's office, we're going to put that off until the next meeting, regular meeting, roll this over so that they have an opportunity to get some more concrete figures for us about what the cost would be of implementing the initial consultancy on that, what the RFP should look like, what some of the other jurisdictions have done. Basically get the cost figures about what we're looking at and what the timeline would be. They've requested that additional time so that they can be more educated for our questions that they anticipate having, and I think that that is a good idea. So as the chair of that committee, I think that we will just roll that over until our next meeting in which they can give us that information.
Thank you. And then I have one quick thing on general business. So we're doing some more background work, doing some more examination, but there's a metro-wide housing, like first-time buyers program that the city was potentially a member of for some time. It's administered through the city and county of Denver. From our records, it looks like it's provided, I can't remember if it was 18 million or potentially $80 million worth of loans in the Lakewood area. We're doing due diligence, but the question is, does council want to reauthorize that? And so when I have more information, we will bring that forth, but I wanted to put that on your radar too. It would be a resolution, and it's administered again through the city and county of Denver. So stay tuned for that, and we'll get you all the facts. Anything else for general business? Okay. Reports. So I want to thank our city manager, Kathy Hodson. who was able to go home and enjoy the evening after a review by City Council where she was evaluated for her work over the last year and did extremely well, and we're very proud of her. And if any of the other council members want to engage on that, but it's an important duty that we have as a city council to review our chief executive, and we take that seriously, and we are very proud of the work that she's done. So she got a great review. I want to acknowledge Bethlehem Lutheran. I was over there last Thursday night, and we know, or some may know, they have a shower trailer with 4 stalls for our homeless folks, but also at their service they had a mobile medical lab and a mobile dental lab and a mobile laundry. So I really want to give them a hats off for what they're doing, the folks that they're collaborating with. Talked to Pastor Ross, and he was really excited about the partnerships that the city has, and said that our CAT team members go regularly to the church as well and engage with the folks who are there. And if you ever want to go and take part, it's called The Table. Meets every Thursday night from 6 to 8, and you'll have a great opportunity to meet many of our residents who do not have an address or a home, but they are regulars there. So I want to just give them a quick shout out. And I think that is all I have. Oh, I went to a groundbreaking today with some of the Two Creeks neighbors for the Jody Apartments, which is actually not in Lakewood, but it's surrounded by Lakewood. It's on 10th and Sheridan. It's been a long-term plan. They've been in the works for 10 years on tax credits for that project, and it's part of the city and county of Denver and the city of Lakewood's 10-minute neighborhood, where the idea is to have everything, or 20-minute neighborhood within a 20-minute walking distance. So that finally the ground was broken, and Maddie was there to represent Two Creeks, and they're pretty excited about that. Mayor Hancock was there as well. Mayor Pro Tem?
On Friday, the mayor and I went out to Bear Creek Lake Park, where the Alameda Kiwanis Club has done a lot of work since 2016. They provided at the visitor center a climbable bear. If you think the blue bear downtown's worth looking at, wait till you see this rock bear, and your kids can climb all over it. A flagstone maze and a gazebo. They're still hard at work out there, but more than just giving us their labor, they donated $20,000 to the creation of park features, and they have offered to donate another $10,000 this spring. So the mayor and I got to have this huge check, but they had the good sense to give the negotiable check to the folks from the park staff. So
we were going to go double it somewhere, but we didn't. Pete?
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to be having our city Ward 3 Saturday meeting at Phillips United Methodist Church. The topic is going to be sewer, water and sewer, but we're going to be talking about the sewer lines. Come join us. Starts at 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Councilor Gutwein?
Thank you. 2 quick things. One is many of you know that last week was a difficult week for the Jefferson County Public School District, and we had, in addition to the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of Columbine, there were also a number of school closures, and then for Wednesday, the entire public school district was closed due to a threatening situation. And I just really want to thank our police department because not only did they provide, I know they are always around the clock, but I know that they were working additionally and had additional law enforcement patrol throughout the neighborhoods at our schools. It provided a lot of much needed comfort to our parents and our teachers and our students. It was just a very challenging and an emotional week, and I feel very thankful that I live in a community that takes this seriously and doesn't take any chances with this. And so just a huge thank you to the Lakewood Police Department, and then also our partners in Jefferson County Public Schools, the FBI, and our Sheriff Department. Oh, and my second thing was we are having a ward meeting 2 Saturdays from now. We will be having a forum discussion about the growth initiative, and I just want to start putting the word out now so that people can know that they can come and get pros, cons, ask questions to a panel. We'll be having for and against speakers, and that will be at our usual location, Bear Valley Church, 9 a.m. on Saturday, May 4th. Thank you.
Councilor Skilling.
Next week, May 1st, is our development dialogue meeting, 6 to 8 o'clock upstairs. Come join us. We'll be talking about slot homes. We'll be talking about maybe a little bit R10 if we get to that. Maybe a little, we're doing commercial maintenance code if we have time for that, but that's certainly on the agenda. So we'll be all of those hot topics. So come and join in.
Bear.
I'm excited about the development dialogue. It's all my topics. Thank you. Just want to mention that May 8th, we're going to have our next ward meeting. It'll be at 1560 Teller Street as usual, 6 to 7:30 p.m. And we'll be talking about a landscaping project in Ward 2 that we want some community input on. So we'd love to have your input. Public work or community resources should be there to talk a little bit about that. So thank you.
Sharon? No. Raymond?
Okay.
Please.
Thank you. I would just like to follow up with just a few comments regarding the gentleman that came to talk about Pearson Grove. That has been a really serious issue for that block, and he was very polite. He said that there was an instance or a thing that happened. What he didn't say was that one of the contractors came into his backyard, did not ask his permission, and when he left, he was on his driveway and urinated. That's a problem. Also, that project hasn't even broken ground, and it's had 3 stop work orders. And I think at some point, we as a city, we as a council, at least need to contemplate some kind of public policy. When you've got some development out there, and you've got some issues on that place, and you've got 3 stop work orders, at what point do you say, wait a minute, we really need to take a relook at what we're doing out there? Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Greer? No? Ms. Cox? Mr. Goldstein, nice job. All right. Thank you to our agent. Appreciate you being here with us tonight. And we'll adjourn at 10:30 p.m.